Candace and Cora, I'm going to get started. If that's okay with you, we're about to hit 5:30.
Yes, we're all ready when you are, Counselor.
And Candace, should I bring Cora into the main room?
Yes, she said she was having some trouble connecting, but if you see her there, you can bring her over.
Okay. Let's try that. No, I just made the wrong person.
Can you hear me, Counselor?
I can now, Cora. Yep.
Okay, I love your shawl or sweater. It's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. I am freezing.
Really beautiful.
I am freezing in the room I'm in.
Oh.
Thank you, Cora, though. I appreciate that. All right, we're going to get started if everybody is ready to go.
We're ready.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Anissa Sabi-George, and I'm the chair of the Boston City Council's Committee on Education. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 executive order modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, the City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public health recommendations and ensuring public access to its deliberations through adequate alternative means. Today's hearing is on docket number 1075, order for a hearing regarding the review of curriculum standards and resources in the Boston Public Schools, and docket number 1076, order for a hearing regarding the implementation of ethnic studies curriculum in the Boston Public Schools. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed on boston.gov/city-council-TV. It will also be rebroadcast at a later date on Comcast 8, RCN 82, Verizon 1964. We will take public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you wish to testify via video conference, please email Cora, CORA.Montrond, MONTROND, at boston.gov to sign up. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation or residence and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure that all comments can be heard. You may also submit written testimony by emailing ccc.education@boston.gov. First, I'd like to introduce my colleagues in order of their arrival and ask if they have brief comments to make. Oh, I just lost you all. If they have brief comments to make, so we can get started with this hearing as it's already been a delayed start. First, I'd like to call on Council President and co-sponsor of today's hearings, Council President Kim Janey. Oh, unmute, please, Councilor Janey.
Sorry, you'd think I'd get it by now. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of my colleagues, thank the panel, and a special thank you, Madam Chair, for your partnership on this issue. I want to thank the many advocates, teachers, students, everyone who has participated thus far, particularly those members of the Ethnic Studies Now Committee for all the work that they put into this. As an education activist, as a child advocate, as a city councilor, I fully support this initiative, and I'm happy to be part of this push so that it is fully implemented across Boston Public Schools. This hearing comes at a very important time in our country as we reimagine how we address systemic inequities in our city, especially those in our Boston Public School system. This is one of the things that I called for when I released the Black and Brown Agenda back in June, where I called for not only decolonizing the curriculum, but for increasing teacher diversity, expanding dual language opportunities, and more. We have a very diverse school district, as everyone on the Zoom knows, but we continue to see disparities when it comes to a variety of things, including seats in our exam schools, a four-year graduation, dropout rates, MCAS scores. We have a persistent opportunity and achievement gap, and now we're seeing inequities with remote learning. Our students deserve a curriculum that not only reflects and honors the many contributions from people of color all over the world, but also empowers them to go out and inspire change as well. I want to again thank the committee for all of their work. And my last thoughts are really from the last hearing that we were just in. And this was a hearing talking about how we commemorate and reflect on our history here in our city and in our nation. And we were challenged by Representative Byron Rushing, who gave us some important words around, whose history we're trying to tell. And I'm reminded of a quote. And this is the quote that really drives me when I'm thinking about decolonizing the curriculum, but because up until then, we can get caught up into just adding other things onto something instead of really decentering European experiences in our curriculum here. And so the quote is that I leave us all with, and I hope we begin this hearing, is until the story of the hunt is told by the lion, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And that is the challenge before us. And so we've got to make sure that we are doing more to tell the true story in the history. So thank you again for your partnership, and thank you everyone for your work.
Thank you very much, Councilor Janey. Next, I have Councilor Braden, then Councilor Flynn for brief opening remarks. Councilor Braden.
I'll keep it very brief. Thank you so much for the sponsors of this hearing. I feel that coming from Northern Ireland, which is plagued by sectarian mistrust and bigotry, one of the initiatives that came out of the peace process was an education for mutual understanding, which meant that Protestant children were taught Irish history and not just the colonizers' history. Everybody, and here in Boston, it's really important that we have a curriculum that reflects the diverse tapestry of who Boston is, the history, the painful and difficult history, but also the good stuff that happens. So I really welcome this conversation, and I look forward to hearing all the advocates and being part of this conversation this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Flynn, then Councilor Bach for brief opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Sabi George. Thank you, Council President Kim Janey, for sponsoring and chairing this hearing. It's an important discussion about the standards, the curriculum standards, and the possibility of having an ethnic studies in our school. I believe that we should have this curriculum that includes ethnic studies, that highlights our communities of color, immigrants, and other communities that have not been included traditionally. I've signed on to a letter previously to the superintendent supporting ethnic studies now. I support ethnic studies in our classroom and like to see how we can implement that. And as Council Braden mentioned at the recent hearing we had about an hour ago, I was able to highlight the incredible role our immigrants played in our country. Not only their service, but also their sacrifice as well. But it's a story that's often been untold in our city, in our country, but immigrants play a critical role in Boston and in our country. And I would like to see that story told as well. So just want to say thank you to Council President Janey, Councilor Anissa Sabi George as well, the panelists, the advocates, and my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you very much, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Bach, and then Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the sponsor and the whole group behind Ethnic Studies Now. And just say, I think it's so important that ethnic studies not just be an elective offered at a few schools, but really an ethic of how we teach history and culture in our schools, in our language arts curricula, in our history curricula. And I think to Councilor Janey's point, it's really about our students seeing themselves as agents and recognizing agents like themselves in history, and seeing that that people who have been real doers and shaping our community come from all communities and all backgrounds. And so I just think I think it's so important for that to nourish people's imagination and sense of ownership over the history of our city. So thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Councilor Ricardo Arroyo, then Councilor Mejia. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to commend the makers of both hearing orders, and I'm looking forward to a robust conversation tonight. I want to thank the administration and advocates for joining us as we discuss both dockets. Regarding both dockets, docket 1075 specifically, resources available for students are different across public schools. This means different quality of education, depending on where you live and how many resources your school has. Every student should have access to arts, health and fitness, athletics, and more. And education resources should be distributed equitably. Regarding docket 1076, I'm proud to have written a letter of support back in August for the Ethnic Studies Now Committee and their effort to ensure that the ethnic studies are implemented in a meaningful and sustainable way in Boston Public Schools. I'm grateful to my colleagues, I believe 11 of the 12, who joined me in calling on the administration to enact this proposal into the BTU Ethnic Studies Now Committee and their partners for leading the way. Over 84% of BPS students are students of color and come from over 139 different countries, which is remarkable when you think about it. And it's important that our curriculum reflect this diversity. And I'll just say, as a BPS product, you know, I remember taking AP, and this was in the early 2000s, not to date myself too much. I'm pretty young for this group, but in terms of the curriculums that we had back then, I remember taking an AP history in one of our exam schools where there was a focus on good slave owners and how few slaves there were, and how the narrative of white supremacy and how we look at and consider our history really dictates, you know, that raised questions in that classroom, that raised questions for students in that classroom. And I think moving forward, it's really important to understand that the lessons that we teach children, about the country and the history of this country, and the lack of education that we do specifically to ethnic history and the way in which our country has perpetrated harm, makes it harder for us to address that harm when we deal with it in society. And so this is incredibly important, not just for children, but also in the ways in which we address these things moving forward that create this harm in the first place of not teaching this kind of history. So thank you to the makers. Thank you to the chair.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo, Councilor Mejia, and then Councilor Wu. Welcome. Thank you to the makers. Thank you, Councilor Sabi George, for your steadfast, always running things on time. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try to keep it as brief as possible because I know politicians, we do talk a lot. But at the end of the day, I didn't work this hard to get here to be silenced. So I'll just be really quick with my remarks. I'm glad that we're having this conversation. Having grown up here in the city of Boston, I understand the deep-rooted history here sometimes is laced in lies. So to have an opportunity for young people to really see themselves reflected in history, I think is important. And I think pairing this hearing in order around curriculum standards along the same sense around ethnic studies makes a lot of sense, because we need to talk about not just what we learn, but how we learn. So I'm really looking forward to unpacking that. And I do have some questions that are going to come directly from the community about curriculum standards. And I very much look forward to hearing more about how we are implementing ethnic studies in our schools, and thank the maker for her for bringing this issue to light. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Wu.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and as to you as a sponsor, as well as with your co-sponsor. I just want to thank you for bringing this forward and reiterate, as so many others have, my full support for taking action and working with BPS to implement this. I want to thank the community members and advocates who have been pushing for this for many, many years, right? I've seen folks tabling at events out in the community and at meetings and showing up. So glad that we're creating a forum to keep that moving now. This is about so many of us who have not felt seen and represented in the, you know, what comes across as the sort of truth that you're being told of where your city has come from and your country has come from. So it's time to really make those tangible connections, connect to an accurate portrayal of how complex our history has been and how much each of us has a role to play in that, and to celebrate and lift up all of the cultures and all of the groups that have shaped and defined not only our city's history, but our country's. So I'm really looking forward to keeping this moving. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councilor Wu, and I appreciate everyone here today. I filed these dockets to give us an opportunity to talk openly about what is working in our curriculum district-wide and what could be better. We all want high-quality education for every student. Such an education would give them a strong foundation in their early education, ensure a robust and well-rounded education throughout their schooling, and provide opportunities to develop their life skills. We need to make sure that every student has access to arts, music, athletics, health, and wellness. I would also like for us to get to a point where every BPS student graduates with CPR training, nutrition and cooking skills, swimming lessons, and other life skills. Tonight, we will also be talking about the need for expansive ethnic studies curriculum in the Boston Public Schools. I'd like to thank Council President Janey for being a co-sponsor of this docket. Ethnic studies ought to be a core component of our curriculum as it helps students to learn about themselves, their families, and communities, as well as the complex and diverse world we live in. When we talk about life skills, it's not just about financial literacy or the ability to cook and sew, but it's also about being well equipped to understand the world around us, who we are as individuals and as people. I am certain tonight will be an interesting conversation. So I'd love to get to it and welcome our first panel, led by Andrea Zayas, Chief Academic Officer. Is that correct? And if you want to introduce your team and go into the order as you have planned for this evening. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Counselor. I would love to just get some support, maybe from Cora, to bring our colleague Shakira Ford Walker.
Oh, I'm happy to bring them in.
Thank you. Beautiful. Yep. Thank you. So good evening, members of the City Council, and thank you again for inviting the BPS Academics Division team to share our work with you and other stakeholders tonight. My colleague Jasny Vasquez is going to be presenting some slides which we've prepared for you, which we think are information rich and which we may or may not be able to fully walk you through tonight, but we hope that the slides in the reference section in particular can help you and us work together on any of the material that we're unable to fully get through. And hopefully it's good reading material and source for ongoing conversation and ongoing work together. So I'll pause there and wait for the slides to go up, and I'll introduce the team. Jazz, if you could go to slide 2. So let me take a moment to acknowledge, thank, and introduce this team of social justice warriors to you. First, I want you to, if you don't mind, joining me in welcoming Assistant Superintendent for the Office of English Learners, Dr. Sylvia Romero Johnson, who's new to Boston, coming to us from Madison, Wisconsin, but far from new to the work of advancing equity for English learners. New to her role, and this is also her first City Council hearing. She will be talking with you in just a few moments. Leading our newly formed Office of Teacher Leadership as Assistant Superintendent, having come up through the BTU ranks, we're really honored to have Shakira Ford Walker leading that office. Bringing over the Excellence for All initiative, incubated in and piloted as an initiative in the Opportunity Gaps office over the last 3 years, Dr. Regine Filippo-Pierre joins us as Deputy CAO, leading various critical special projects, including the infusion of EFA practices across the division. In our Academics and Professional Learning Office, which houses STEM, early childhood, and our content teams, Christine Landry serves as Assistant Superintendent and will be sharing much of the presentation here with me tonight. Jill Carter, who leads the office, now called the Office of Health and Wellness, which you may remember and carries much of the same spirit and the work of the office formerly known as Cell Well. Additionally, we're joined by Ethan Dablemont-Burns, who you've heard from in recent hearings as well, and who you all know well as the former school leader at the Manning, who's bringing his commitment and focus on inclusion to our team. Finally, you'll notice that we have a large vacancy in our office of expanded learning opportunities left after one of our esteemed colleagues retired this summer. The position is currently posted, so please share that with your networks. You can go to the next slide. The council is certainly familiar with the vision and mission that was drafted in the first year of Dr. Caselius's tenure as part of the strategic planning process. Next slide. And importantly, we ground our work in this inspirational and aspirational statement from the Opportunity and Achievement Gaps Policy. Every child in every classroom in every school of the Boston Public Schools system has the same opportunity to achieve the greatness within them as anyone else. It's critically important to us as a team that we state our unshakable belief in the brilliance of all of our students and our bottom line commitment to equity. All of our initiatives, strategies, and daily work are in the direction of making this statement a true one. But we know that we are too far from this today, and we have been for far too long. Next slide. This distance from that goal was enumerated in quite a bit of detail in the DESE report in their recent review, which became public just before schools closed due to the pandemic in March. DESE noted major concerns with nearly every aspect of the district: operations, leadership, governance, instruction, autonomies. They partnered with AIR, the American Institute of Research, to conduct dozens of interviews and visit hundreds of classrooms across the district, really to gather sufficient evidence to make their claims of what they called disarray, the disarray in which they found the district, which frankly not only matched many of my own analysis after arriving in Boston a couple of years ago and after taking a deeper look under the hood, but also I believe they outline much of what the council is interested in hearing from us today, going forward, going toward how we redesign our district to eliminate opportunity gaps. Some of the poignant and cutting quotes from the report: the district does not have a clear, coherent strategy for district-wide strategy for supporting low-performing schools and has limited capacity to support all schools designated by DESE as requiring assistance or intervention. Schools are organized in a way that create haves and have-nots. An absence of coherence in district curriculum affects how curriculum and instruction are implemented across the district, leading to widely variable learning experiences, pedagogies, expectations for student learning. These are some of the brutal facts that we look in the face of every day, while maintaining radical hope that in partnership with community and by lifting up the strengths found in the report, including the essentials for instructional equity, our culturally and linguistically sustaining practices framework, and excellence for all and other initiatives, we can realize our core commitment to becoming an anti-racist district. Next slide. While the DESE review was underway last winter, the superintendent's strategic planning process was also underway and was deeply informed by the results of that review, as well as dozens of community meetings and input from stakeholders, leading to our 6 strategic commitments. Next slide. And our multiple driving priorities. The work of our division is fairly centered on commitments 1 and 2, eliminating opportunity gaps and accelerating learning. Next slide. Through last year's budget process, in my first month as CAO, we drafted these multi-year imperatives. Imperatives because we believe that these shifts are foundational to resetting the standard for teaching and learning in our district. These imperatives are focused on improving what Richard Elmore first referred to as the instructional core, which you see here. The instructional core has 3 ingredients: the teacher and the student in the presence of content. It's that relationship between those 3 that determines the quality and the extent of learning. Next slide. Building on Dr. Elmore's work, we include in our thinking, planning, and designing the multiple humans and communities that are in context inside of which we conduct educational processes. Educators are situated in schools and in the district. Students live in the context of their families and community, and instructional content which is embedded in curricular standards and mitigated by professional learning communities. Next slide. When these contextually connected communities are functioning well, the conditions are set for the types of learning experiences that we heard families, teachers, and students express as what they want and need from the Boston Public Schools. Next slide. Aligned with the DESE report, we set these 3 division-wide goals in alignment with our imperative to eliminate opportunity gaps. We'll go into detail for each of these goals that are active right now during the school year We'll give you relevant information about how we pivoted to remote learning and share some current information about this year's progress to date toward resetting that standard for teaching and learning through the instructional core. Next slide, and I'll turn the mic over to Christine Landry.
Thanks so much, Andrea. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the Council. So I'm going to start by talking about our district-wide goal number 1. So while the individuality of each of our schools is critical to maintain, it's also the work of the academics department to ensure access to relevant and rigorous learning for all students. So this work starts with the adoption of high quality, culturally relevant materials and practices, which we started with English and Spanish language arts curriculum this year in our K-8 transformation schools. And will continue through our other content areas and grade levels to ensure coherence over the course of the next several years. The Office of English Learners is leading parallel work to ensure equity through quality materials for our ESL and SLIFE classrooms as well. And common and consistent implementation of Google Classrooms and Seesaw have enabled the district and teachers to curate and share learning materials through our time in remote learning. Next slide. So our effort to improve literacy began by recognizing that students bring a range of knowledge and experiences that influence their learning and engagement. Our world demands that high levels of literacy exist in a variety of formats. To make sure our students met this demand, as I noted previously, we began with research-based strategies in the areas of reading, writing, viewing, listening, speaking as well. And those included high quality and culturally and linguistically sustaining texts, raising teachers' expectations for their students so that all students develop curiosity and critical thinking skills, broadening teaching and learning based on the reality of students' experiences, and supporting teachers to be able to differentiate instruction and provide complex and engaging texts in an increasingly diverse student body. So this work has taken an investment in curricular materials. It's also taking coaching and feedback for teachers looking to improve their practices, which we're addressing with the inclusion of 40 transformation coaches in our 33 lowest performing schools this year. It also takes the coordinated central support and highly effective professional development for all teachers. Next slide. So this year, we are also increasing access to art, music, and physical education classes. Students who have more opportunities to explore their passions, to fuel their curiosity, and to feel success is an important component of all students' experiences, which was expressed by the council at the beginning of the hearing. And also, we believe that students will be more focused and engaged in the core instruction if they have these rigorous engagement opportunities. The investment made this year also provides us with time to the time needed to change instruction. So when students are in their additional specialist classes, teachers have more time to collaborate and prepare. The new transformation coaches in our 33 lowest performing schools provide instructional coaching support aligned to the district curriculum during this additional planning time. And then the other component that we're looking at is how well it's working. How do we monitor this work? So we should see that parents will remark positively about our schools, that students will remark about improved school climate and academics, and then we'll see academic achievement begin and reflect the power of this investment. Next slide. Okay. And for goal 2, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Shakira Ford Walker.
Thank you, Christine. Good evening, everyone. One of our second and probably one of the most critical goals in the division is really thinking about the ways in which we build our teacher capacity to address unfinished teaching and learning. More importantly, to effectively engage our students and prepare them for success in college, career, and life. And we have done that through 4 means. The first is utilizing a common set of observation and feedback frameworks. The district has recently adopted the Culturally Responsive Instruction Observation Protocol, also known as the CRIOP tool, as a common observation and feedback framework for transformation schools, while also thinking about the ways we offer training and support to those schools outside of transformation. Professional learning and monitoring support is also happening via our school learning walks, as well as task analysis and ongoing collaboration with the Office of the Opportunity Gap and accountability and data. Through job-embedded coaching, the Office of Academics and Professional Learning has reorganized to focus this year on job-embedded coaching and professional learning. Really, that's in alignment with teacher improvement as well as other offices in academics, namely, as Andrea mentioned, the newly formed Office of Teacher Leadership and Development. And this leads me to discussing with you some of the work that's coming out of that office, namely opportunities for connected professional learning as well as peer-led professional learning. The Telescopes Network mission is really to think about the ways in which we connect our BPS educators to resources, opportunities, and each other in order to improve student learning. So our goal is to really first find out what is it that educators want, what do they need to learn in order to best serve the needs of their students. Then we seek out and magnify the bright spots across the district, and I'm sure all you know there are many. Who are the successful teachers in Boston Public Schools? What are the effective practices? Where can we find models of teacher-driven professional learning? Based on some data from our Connect and Share sessions we held over the summer and at the end of last school year, we found that educators really wanted a space to house resources, upload their artifacts from their teaching and learning, and hold discussions related to content and their grade level. I think we had probably over more than 500 participants who expressed that they like to follow up on their learning from the session in some way. Given the climate we find ourselves in, probably more than half of them requested opportunities for asynchronous connection using a platform like Google Classroom or Zoom. Educators are finding that they also want spaces to hold synchronous sessions and what we call professional learning communities based on their content level and their grade level needs. This, for us, really serves as an opportunity to showcase our amazing professionals. We call them humble experts, where we can feature and highlight those better practices that we organize around a Google Classroom and utilizing its features for resource sharing and discussions. And I think one of the things you'll find is this goal of creating educator-led district-wide Google Classrooms is really aligned with the superintendent's vision of teacher leadership as well. Next slide, please. As you all know, Boston is fortunate to have so many excellent educators. We have dedicated teachers and school leaders, as well as other school-based staff who work tirelessly for our students, for our families, and for our communities. In this next year, we are going to ask them to reflect on their practice. Think about the ways you want to implement new curriculum. What are the ways you want to innovate to address the challenges that have come as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic? How do we engage our students, our families, and our school community in ways that are new and more inclusive? We also hope to prepare to support this change through some team-based professional development and learning experiences, high-quality instructional materials, frequent coaching, and consistent feedback, all of the things that I know helped me become a really great practitioner when I was a teacher in the Boston Public Schools. We are also investing in school leadership development. This includes investments in our recruitment and pipeline efforts as well. Next slide. I think I'm turning it back over to Christine.
You are. Thanks so much, Shakira. And I'm going to continue where Shakira left off by talking about the three major investments in academics this year that have really supported this work of building teacher capacity. So those three major investments are aligned to deliver high quality instruction to more engaged students and who are focused and ready to learn. So first, we had a K-8 literacy initiative, including professional learning and implementation support. Along with that, increased instructional quality through transformation coaches. Again, those are the 40 coaches who we've added to our 33 lowest performing schools. Next slide. So these considerable investments made to support this work have translated into remote learning world as well. So here you'll see just two examples of that work and practice in our schools. In the top left corner, you have Principal Robbie Chisholm at the Condon doing the running man with a student after a Zoom interview in which the student interviewed his principal about his experiences with social dance as part of his dance class. The Condon is one of 34 schools that received additional enrichment opportunities for students this year. In the second video, Mary Lyon Upper School English teacher Katie McGuire is facilitating her class in a rigorous and engaging close reading lesson using strategies which she learned directly along with her teammates in the Standards Institute Professional Learning, which we provided for all of our transformation schools as well. Next slide. So we're building on our strengths, we're facing the brutal facts, and we're recognizing the need to redouble our efforts to close opportunity gaps and guarantee an excellent education for all of our students. So this also leads us to continue the work of adopting Mass Core as our common graduation requirements for the district so that there's both transparency and rigor for families and students across the district. It's also driving us to move forward with work started last year to bring better coherence and equity to grading and to transcripts as well. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Jill Carter to speak about further policy changes related to health and wellness.
Thank you, Christine. And good evening, everyone. As Christine said, my name is Jill Carter. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Health and Wellness. The Boston Public Schools is deeply committed to meeting the needs of the whole child for every student in every classroom. This commitment is rooted in an understanding that students' physical and mental health, emotional well-being, and positive development are directly linked with academic success. This seems both obvious and essential as we fight to contain the coronavirus and recover from the loss to our communities. The 5-year strategic plan outlines our commitments to eliminating opportunity and achievement gaps, as well as accelerating learning. But these efforts depend on our capacity to address both the health and social challenges our students face, such as hunger, chronic illness, physical inactivity, and poor mental health and sexual health, especially for our students made vulnerable by systemic racism and other forms of oppression. In alignment with the strategic plan, the BPS Wellness Policy strives to reduce health inequities that interfere with learning. The strategic plan commits us to fully implement physical education and comprehensive health education according to the BPS Wellness Policy. Phys ed and health ed are essential to a young person's overall education and foundation for lifelong healthy living. Next slide, please. Our office oversees the administration of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, or the YRBS, part of the CDC's National Data Surveillance System to monitor health behaviors that contribute to the leading causes of death, disability, and social problems among youth and adults in the United States. The data provide an overview of the key behaviors related to physical activity, sexual health, substance use, and mental health that illustrate the need to address physical and health literacy through physical education, health education, and social emotional learning. This critical population level data allows us to examine the prevalence of the risk behaviors among Boston high school students, the trends in the changes over time, and significant differences among key subgroups. The data on this slide were collected in the spring of 2019, an important snapshot pre-pandemic. And for some data points, we are able to compare prevalence as far back as 1993, when we first started this administration of the YRBS. While there has been some progress over time and some persistent challenges, PE, health ed, and CEL remain a vital part of a multi-sector approach to improving the health and well-being of students and increasing health equity that cannot be achieved by individual topic-specific programming. Can you go to the next slide, please? Physical education is a standard-based academic subject that supports the education and the well-being of the whole child. PE develops physically literate individuals who have the competence, confidence, and desire to enjoy a lifetime of healthful physical activity. PE teachers provide instruction that is inclusive for all students and ensures a safe and supportive learning environment. We have made great progress in physical education in the district over the past 10 years. In school year 10-11, 65% of schools were staffed to offer any PE, and now that number has increased to 93%. That includes 100% for elementary K to 8 and middle schools. And while high schools are still the farthest behind, they have seen the biggest growth over the past 10 years, increasing from 39% offering any PE in school year 10-11 to 76% this year. PE is well supported in the district with comprehensive supports available to all teachers, including ongoing professional development, instructional coaching, professional learning communities, technical assistance, as well as access to equipment and standards-based curriculum. 91% of schools report aligning to the BPS PE framework standards and grade level curriculum. 95% say they use at least one district endorsed PE curriculum, thus showing coherence, as Shakira referenced earlier. We are very near to closing the gap on PE. We've also been able to support comprehensive physical activity this year during remote time, starting a BPS Moves Together program that includes family-friendly TV show and on BNN and remote after-school physical activities. Next slide, please. Health education has always been paramount. It builds students' assets and empowers our youth with critical knowledge and skills on disease prevention, health promotion, decision-making, and goal setting, so they can be stewards of their wellness, agents of change today and for a lifetime. Comprehensive health ed K-12 advances healthy behaviors in nutrition, sleep, physical activity, and sexual health. It promotes social emotional intelligence and lowers students' risk concerning alcohol, tobacco, addiction, violence, and bullying. Health education also addresses the stressors of adolescence, including identity, changing relationships, anxiety, mental health, and suicidality. We have made great strides in building a district-wide health ed community, offering PDs and coaching support. And in 1920, we hired a health education instructional coach for supporting teachers of students with disabilities in an effort to ensure equitable access to programming. We have designed a new scope and sequence for remote and hybrid instruction, and we quickly pivoted to provide engaging activities for digital learning, including the virtual classroom, one of which is on this slide. It addresses the important student health and safety protocols for COVID. In 2018, less than 50% of BPS schools reported having health education in accordance with the wellness policy. Our 2020 data will be available when we report out on the wellness policy later in the school year. Next slide, please. It's important to note that over the past 5 years, our office has supported schools to make great strides in increasing access to elements of health education, particularly sexual health education. In 2018, 60% of middle schools and high schools were implementing sexual health education. Evidence-based sexual health education provides students with age-appropriate information and skills necessary to empower them to take personal responsibility for their health and the health of their peers. From helping young people develop healthier relationships to improving sexual health equity and access among LGBTQ youth, sexual health education positively impacts student health in a variety of ways and connects students to sexual health services in the community. Our office is engaged in a 5-year CDC-funded grant called Empowering Teens Through Health. That grant work focuses on improving the quality, quantity, and equity of sexual education, sexual health services, and safe and supportive learning environments. School supports for this work include instructional coaching, professional development, and youth development. We've developed a Boston Y2 Connect, an online resource that helps BPS youth connect to community-based health resources and services. We are creating a youth advisory board, which will provide a space for students to engage in meaningful activities of public health leadership. From physical education to comprehensive health ed, our programming helps students to be healthy so that they can reach their fullest potential in all aspects of life today, tomorrow, and well into the future. And with that, thank you for listening, and I will turn it over to, I believe.
I've got it, Jill. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you, Jasny. So as the council knows all too well, in March, our school buildings had to abruptly close their doors as a result of the pandemic. We quickly moved to provide first paper packets for what we thought would be just 2 weeks of a closure at a distance. And during that time, quickly moved to providing open access to culturally affirming, standards-aligned materials directly to educators and families through an online format. We developed a resource website for remote learning, and also through a novel partnership with Boston Neighborhood Network, our local public access television station. In fact, I'd love to take a moment and just give a really special thank you to General Manager Glenn Williams for all of his ongoing support and direction throughout the spring and the summer. While so we ran, BPS TV for early childhood, the arts, and many other content areas, including peer-to-peer learning. While the pandemic really has no silver linings because our collective losses as a nation and as a district are so great, we've learned that while we have been at a distance, we've also found ways to amplify voices even further. BSACs, climate curriculum, a multilingual library for families, race and equity resources for educators, and weekly CLSP standards-aligned lessons are just some of the resources that we were able to make immediately available over the first 12 weeks of the pandemic response and through the summer. Next slide. Certainly, spring access to Chromebooks, information, and resources was imperfect. We heard feedback through our community equity roundtables, through focus groups with families, educators, and students from this body, and we devised plans to launch remote learning in the fall in a stronger and much more equitable way. Next slide, Christine.
Sure, thank you. So as Andrea noted, as our colleagues in OIT and operations responded to technical challenges from the spring, the academics team responded to this feedback with the website, with the BNN programming that she noted, as well as more and more nuanced support for teachers in this new environment. So this following chart shows the number and a sampling of professional learning topics shared by the academics team in collaboration with partners and with teacher leaders as well. Next slide. And then to kick off the 2021 school year, we invited Dr. Ibram Kendi and Bettina Love to help us reset and reground in our commitment to equitable instruction during our Teachers Summit in the summer. Dr. Love has worked with our arts department for the past 2 years to support our work of decolonizing the music and the arts curriculum. And she was eager to share her knowledge and push with the broader BPS community. We're honored also to have Dr. Kendi in Boston and to have had him support our launch to propel our work of actualizing the opportunity gap policy forward. Next slide, and back to Andrea.
Building on our North Star of really becoming an anti-racist district, we developed this infrastructure, provided support, and delineated accountabilities in order for our students to thrive this fall. Next slide.
And so to ensure an equitable recovery, we strengthened and streamlined the infrastructure behind it to provide better clarity to all of our stakeholders. So that started with underscoring that we were returning to school this year, albeit in a remote context. But that meant we would return to a regular school day and access to services for our students and our families. This included a common learning management system for K-6. So we had Seesaw for our younger grades and Google Classroom for our older grades. A common way to understand student experiences and performance with the Panorama tool. A common high quality adaptive platform purchased and managed at the central office level as well, and tools and training for better family communication and voice, including virtual home visits, which teachers were trained on during the summer PD, and talking points as a two-way communication tool in multiple languages. Next slide, and I'll pass it to Sylvia.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sylvia Romero Johnson, and I'm the new Assistant Superintendent for the office.
I don't know. I'm finding it hard to hear, Sylvia. I don't know if that's everybody else's experience. Sylvia, if perhaps you could double check your microphone. And while you're doing that, I just received a text that this presentation is long. I think when we're talking about the curriculum of the Boston Public Schools and all of the things that the components that go into academics, I expect it to be long. So I apologize for those that thought this would be a brief presentation, but to educate, 54,000 students across our school district, across all grade levels, needs to be comprehensive. So I appreciate sort of the detail of this presentation. Sylvia?
Yep. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
It's a little bit better. Are you?
Yeah, my volume is at the top, so I'll try to project.
That's actually a little bit better right there. Thank you.
All right, my section is about support. The Division of Academics met with multiple internal and external stakeholder groups to build off of what worked for remote learning in the spring and implement a more robust system of support and resources to ensure an equitable school reopening for all of our learners. We provided at-home learning kits to exactly 17,138 students in grades K through 2nd. We worked with our BTU partners to have dedicated professional learning before instruction commenced this year. Our returning Boston Strong Educator Summit drew our teachers and staff to complete over 56,000 professional learning sessions over a 2-week period. We worked with an organization called Links Spring, which provided professional learning on remote learning. And we provided teachers with support on an ongoing basis on how to implement project-based learning. We provided revised pacing, scope, and sequence with aligned assessments, as well as virtual coaching, and walkthroughs will start in January. The Office of English Learners has launched language-based parent groups as part of the overall Look Act implementation. These groups have become a crucial partner to share the information at the district level with our various language-based communities to create a sense of community for them. The groups continue to meet monthly and have participated in school reopening dialogues with the superintendent, welcome back sessions targeted specifically for EL families in partnership with BPS teachers. And currently, these parent groups are part of the exam school information sessions as well. Finally, the Office of English Learner has launched a language-based playlist on the BPS YouTube page that provides videos in native language for parents. And now I pass it on to Ethan.
Great, thank you so much. Nice to see you all this evening. And appreciate your comments, Counselor, on how comprehensive all this work is. It is a lot to try and wrap together the whole curriculum in one presentation. And we'd love to come back and talk more because we could probably go deeper. I really appreciate Sylvia's detail on the improvements, but we know that you can sort of say stuff. You also need to make sure that there are accountability feedbacks. And so we've built some accountability measures that allow us to get qualitative and quantitative feedback to ensure that equitable recovery that we're looking for. A really crucial piece of that has been our equity roundtables that I know a lot of community members have been a part of, that we have every 2 weeks to make sure that we are having conversations based in data and looking at equity from a variety of perspectives. And I've been a part of a number of those conversations and know that they've been really robust and helpful in providing feedback and changing our trajectory of the work as needed. We're also staying really close to the data with data dashboards related to at the school level, the region level, and the district level. We're looking at attendance. We're looking at student success using our new platform called Panorama, which is an exciting new tool we have to really look carefully at students and who needs what and how we can make sure they get that. And we also have our Illuminate platform for using assessment. We've just recently launched our virtual walkthroughs, which has been exciting. We think those are going to be a really helpful protocol so that we can get that qualitative data that is really important. We also want to make sure that our schools are really sticking to the guardrails that we're setting out, that Sylvia talked about previously. It's one thing to say all those things. It's another thing to make sure we're sticking to them. We're really keeping track of both our English language learners through the course level attendance in Aspen and all our students with disabilities through the progress reports in particular, but also using the traditional measures of grading and report cards as well to make sure that we're keeping track of what is happening for our students. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Andrea, I think.
Thanks, Ethan. Just wanted to share with you all some publicly available data that's in our district dashboard. Again, there are no silver linings or to claim during COVID. It feels inappropriate to do that, but our teachers and administrators are still making magic in our virtual classrooms every day, and certainly in the classrooms that continue to serve high in-person priority students. These data right here are, like I said, publicly available in our district dashboard. And notably, just want to share that attendance is just slightly lower than what it would be during a typical year. And we are currently administering a district-wide survey to better understand student, family, and educator experiences that will close after the winter break. And we're looking forward to being able to dive into that data, further understand and adjust. So we're happy to provide those to you here by neighborhood. Next slide, and I'll turn it to Ethan.
So one of the things that we are focusing on with our students with disabilities is, of course, compensatory services. When schools closed in March 17th, there's no question that there was a lot of learning loss, as Andrea has highlighted. There's no silver lining here, and we know that there has been a cost. And so we are working hard to come up with a plan that exists within the guidance from DESE to make sure that students who are eligible for students with disabilities, that they get what they need. It's not necessarily a one-to-one, so, oh, I missed 1 hour of speech, therefore I'm going to get 1 hour of speech, or I missed, all. It's really based on the level of regression and lack of progress that a student has made. And so we're looking at that, and each student and family is entitled to a meeting to have a discussion with school-based staff about this. We think that that is really important. So we've come up with a variety of structures to try and meet these needs, because we know there's going to be a lot. The one that we're excited about is really starting the week of January 6th, we are going to have an after-school program that we're going to be able to run virtually, that will be able to provide a number of academic supports and these compensatory services. It'll be between 4 and 6. It'll run virtually. BPS teachers will be prioritized during the hiring process. And then we'll talk with students and families about what seems to make sense. But I think that will be a great opportunity to try and get some of this recovery that we're all hoping for. We will do the same thing during February and April. We'll have vacation academies, and we hope perhaps that some of those could be in person. We'll just have to see what happens with the rates. And then same thing with the ESY. And for ESY, we would allow for, we would extend the ESY timeline for ESY students, and also perhaps make ESY available for non-ESY students so that we can make up those compensatory services. And with that, I think I turn it back to Andrea.
To Sylvia.
Sylvia, go Sylvia. It's nice to have a team.
Compensatory services for ELs are carried out through the out-of-school time learning opportunities. Last summer, we were able to offer summer programming for English learners, and we were able to reach approximately 1/3 of all ELs. We offered EL programs in 56 sites. We hired a significant number of staff, and we had a daily average attendance of about 82%. We are highlighting on this slide some of the feedback from our teachers. We now have available some grants for our teachers to continue to offer out of school time this spring and summer. Now next to Andrea.
Thank you, Sylvia and Ethan. So as I was mentioning before, there's still magic happening in our classrooms, albeit remote. And I wish we had time to, during the day, to visit some classrooms together virtually, and hopefully sometime soon in person again. But let me just give you one short example of some of the really great work that our students, teachers, and administrators are doing in remote learning. You'll have two examples in the deck that we've shared, but let's just look at one together. It's about a 1.5-minute long clip of a student stretching his academic language through an investigation. Jasmine, let's see if we can get the volume.
The audio on this. So it looks like we're not getting the audio. Could Sylvia or Chief Zayas, if you could just describe to us what we're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a student engaging in an investigation around creating a conductor. So students were provided with at-home science kits. So they have the physical materials. You see the small light bulb there, the wires that are needed, the positive and negative. I need my scientists to give me the language, the positive and the negative touch points, the conductors. They're really investigating what conducts and what does not conduct electricity in order to create a circuit and light a light bulb. Pretty exciting to be able to do at home. And then with the, Christine was telling us a little bit earlier about the infrastructure. So this is one of the platforms that we are encouraging schools to use that we've provided for everyone, called Flipgrid. So students can take short videos of their work and then upload them to a safe and secure platform for their teachers to view, to give feedback to them, and also that their fellow classmates can also view and give each other feedback on. So a pretty fun and engaging way to record learning and to make it come to life. So as you're looking at your deck on your own time, you'll have one more video, which is of a similar investigation. So we can go through to the next slide after this, I think is another video, and then we can skip past that one. And then we'll next, we'll share here that while we're in the midst of continuing to respond to student, educator, family, and school needs during this pandemic, we're also continuing to keep our eye on the big strategic work of our division and of our district. This is multi-year, complex work to undo institutional racism and to reconstruct an anti-racist district. One of these key projects and key pieces of big work is ethnic studies. We share your commitment to bringing ethnic studies to life in our district. And we'd like to give you a brief update at this point on our work, which began in earnest in the winter of last school year. Next slide, and I'll turn it to Christine.
Okay, thanks so much, Andrea. And as she said, we'll be closing out this presentation talking specifically about ethnic studies. And ethnic studies falls under commitment 1 in the grid you just saw, but it really supports all of them and is included in all of those commitments. I wanted to start too by acknowledging the amazing work that many of you acknowledged at the beginning of this presentation, that the Ethnic Studies Now team has been engaged with the History Department and BPS for the past several years. And we are pleased to be able to make critical steps this year to codify the ethnic studies work as part of our district curriculum and academic in the academics department. So I want to share a few highlights from the work. Oh, and if Jazz could get back to the slide. So this year we've entered into a contract with an internationally renowned scholars in the field who are also thankfully close to home. The collaborative of Asian American, Native American, Latino, and African American Institutes, or KNALA Institute at UMass Boston, has become our partner in this work, along with the Ethnic Studies Now team. So we hired a teacher leader to coordinate the ethnic studies work this past summer. We stipended 3 teacher leaders from the BTU Ethnic Studies team to compensate them for curriculum development and teacher support during the summer for teachers who both wanted to start teaching ethnic studies or continue their work in this area. The introductory course in ethnic studies, which has been developed over the past 2 years, is now a course, a core course in our course catalog. It is a Mass Core aligned history and social studies course, and it's currently being taught across the district in both 8th and 9th grade classrooms. So PD for this course, which we call Boston Through a Wider Lens, was facilitated through the returning Boston Strong Educator Summit for nearly 20 participants this summer. And it was co-taught by the KNALA Institute and our teacher leaders from the BTU. Moving forward, a set of identity-specific courses, Black Studies, Latinx Studies, Asian and Native American Studies, will be rolled out between the spring and next fall. KNALA is currently building out these courses, which will also be Mass Core aligned. A full-time coach position has also been posted, and the interview process has recently started. Although we hope to have started this process earlier in the year, we're very happy to report that we were able to move the position from 0.5 to a fully funded full-time position for the remainder of this year and ongoing as part of the history department. So the coach will provide direct support to teachers, onboard new teachers to ethnic studies, and manage the funding of the department and liaise with the KNALA Institute as well. Next slide. And just a bit about the course that is currently being taught, which you see here on the Ethnic Studies website that the BTU team keeps up for us. So the Introduction to Ethnic Studies course provides an interactive introduction to the experiences of people of color in the United States. The focus of the course is on the construction and transformation of identity, power, and collective action. Beginning with the examination of personal, familial, and community narratives, the course provides a healing-centered space where cultural wealth, intersectionality, and critical reflection are valued. So as I noted, the course has been codified and is part of our course catalog now. It takes on a different flavor and a different tone in each neighborhood where it's taught as a course that is steeped in the community. So the course also utilizes an intersectional lens to analyze how power and oppression, as well as the construction of race and racism, have shaped the lives of students and their communities in Boston, the United States, and globally. By having students study resistance movements and reconstruct their personal narratives, the course aims to empower, inspire, and provide transformational tools that can be used to understand, develop awareness, and take action in order to begin to realize personal and societal transformation and social justice. So apart from the critical content of this course, I also wanted to note that its framing presents a powerful model to the district for place-based and project-based learning, which we hope to infuse more and more through all of our curriculum as we move forward. So I'm going to turn it back to Andrea for final thoughts.
Thank you, Christine. With Counselor Asabi George's permission, we'd love to just rewind a couple of slides to see if we can play that video. We think we figured out the tech issue, and go back one more, and let's just give it one more quick shot. Jasmine, are you unmuted? unmute yourself on Zoom. Counselor or Cora, if there's a way to unmute Jasny. Okay,
She's unmuted.
she's unmuted. Okay.
Oh, what a bummer. Colleagues will be able to see this for themselves. I'm sorry, those viewing at home will not be able to see this. I do appreciate the level of detail in this presentation. Like I said before, in the midst, we are for sure a big school district with lots going on across all grade levels. So the presentation, again, was very thoughtful and very thorough. But I do want to make sure that we move through questions so that we can get to our panel. I have a brief question, or a quick question, I think, and then we'll get on to colleagues, starting next with Councillor Janey. First, I do want to make sure, what are the pieces in place that make sure that we do have a common and consistent, not identical or exact, but common and consistent curriculum across all schools, across all grade levels, for our students in the district?
So I'll say that there are three pieces to that are in place. The first is our pedagogical framework, which is the essentials for instructional equity. We may have skipped a slide, but Christine was going to share a little bit with you that I'll actually invite her to share now about how we reaffirmed that framework this year. And the other two things are just as important, the Massachusetts standards, which undergird all of the expectations for content. And then finally, our commitment to the culturally and linguistically sustaining practices framework.
I do think it's really important across all grade levels and across all schools at the same grade level that our students do have access to that common and consistent delivery of academics, access to opportunities, exposure to the arts, to phys ed, to athletics, that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'll just quickly talk about the essentials for instructional equity, which our district engaged in creating 3 years ago now, in a very cross-functional way, engaging with many teachers, community members, central office staff. And we developed this framework for instruction, as Andrea said, as the foundation that we would build all of our curriculum off of. And last year, when the new superintendent came in, it was really important to her to make sure that we had that foundation in place. The year before, with Laura Perel in as superintendent, there were many pieces going on and we were not able to continue the work of the essentials. So we went through a process last year of interviewing over 1,000 BPS staff members in 36 schools to ask them what they thought our foundation should be in our instructional framework. And they very strongly and resoundingly said the essentials sounded like the right thing and that we should continue that work. And I think it's important to note too that although there are many challenges that were unearthed in the DESE report, one that they found to be a great strength of ours was the work that we have done around an instructional framework. So that also sort of compelled us to continue this work in focusing on safe and healthy learning environment, rigorous instruction and tasks, and assessing for learning. It's really the basis and the basic parts of instruction that we have to get right first, and then build from there, as we've done with our transformation schools, to really have that common curriculum across, especially in our schools that are struggling the most, as you said, as a place to build from, right, and to express yourself in your school's community in different ways, but to have a common experience for all of our students to ensure equity and to ensure rigor across the board.
Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to colleagues, Council President Janey, and then we'll have Councillor Braden. We'll do a 5-minute timer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you again for the thoughtful presentation. And just a quick shout out to Ms. Walker. She'll always have a special place in my heart back since you were a kindergarten teacher at Young Achievers. This is very encouraging, and so it's exciting to hear the movement. As Chair Asabi George has already said, there's a lot that we'd like to see in the curriculum, certainly civics, financial literacy, entrepreneurship, the list goes on. And certainly our educators are being asked to do an awful lot. So I really do appreciate everyone here. And I'm encouraged by the conversation. Quick question, I hear that the ethnic studies curriculum is now a course, yes? It's a class, so it's an elective?
Yes.
And you said 8th and 9th graders?
Yes, yes. It was written as a 9th grade introductory course, but we do have some middle school that are using it.
How have parents and students and others been engaged in the process? I heard in the presentation, the institutes at UMass and all of the other humble experts inside the district and out who have been helpful and supportive. How have you engaged students and parents in this?
Yeah, so many ways, and over several years, you know, as the council mentioned, this work has been in progress for a while, and the course has been developed over the past several years and has had several different incarnations, where again, I want to give credit to the BTU team who did engage with students and with family members during that time to develop the course, to codify the course with the history department. Which we wrapped up this spring.
And it's available, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I know that timer we're on.
Yeah.
And so it's available this fall, the course was available
Yes,
this
so people are taking it right now.
They're taking it right now, okay, wonderful. So I think, again, very encouraging, and for me, I see this as a first step, an important step, and really getting to the goals as identified in the Opportunity and Achievement Gap policy that was adopted by the school committee that calls for a decolonized curriculum. And this is an important step, but it is not quite that. So I think, you know, very important, and just, you know, one example using the quote that I talked about at the beginning of the hearing. And I heard someone on the call talk about the curriculum, and it's important that you have resistance movements. You said the students are studying resistance movements throughout history. I think that's incredibly powerful. But when we think about the resistance, oftentimes it is about centering white oppression, and that is what people have to resist. So again, it continues to center this white narrative. And so if we're truly going to decolonize, we've got to go beyond that. Important to talk about those movements because they're so powerful. But there's a lot more to being Black, to being Asian, to being Latinx than our fight against oppression. And so, you know, I want us to encourage us to kind of continue to move. I know I'm not the only one on the Zoom who was taught Columbus sailed the ocean, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That's how I was taught to remember that date. And I know I might be a little older than some of the folks here, but I know I'm not the only one. There's a lot of unlearning we have to do in our schools and in society, because everywhere we turn, Black students, brown students, students of certain religious groups, or depending on who they love, are targeted, they're criminalized, and they're taught that they are invalid. And so we've got a lot of work to undo that. And I really appreciate the efforts of folks here. I'm gonna reserve the rest of my time. I know the hour is late, Madam Chair, and I know we've got more speakers. And so thank you again. If there's an opportunity later, happy to weigh in again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Janey, and we will also share the slide deck. Councilor Braden, then Councilor Flynn. Councilor Braden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to drill down into the compensatory education for our special education students, and how I think it was mentioned that it would be offered on the basis of perceived loss of skills or regression. So I'd like some more information, because in my experience, sometimes the parents who are least able to advocate are the ones that get sidelined in that discussion about compensatory education. And I don't know if there's a formalized way to ensure that every student who needs it will get the adequate compensatory education in special ed.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Braden, for that question. I think actually in Massachusetts, we have set up a compensatory services system that is actually more robust and more rigorous than what the federal government has asked us to do. And so I think, not to say that means everyone's going to get what they need, but at least we are being ambitious in trying to make sure kids get what they need in terms of compensatory services. And to your point, to that we have said that every special education student is entitled to and should have a meeting with the school personnel about those compensatory services. So even if a family doesn't necessarily know about the process, know that they may be eligible for these things, it is incumbent on school staff to reach out to them and make sure that they know they could potentially be eligible for this so that we can make sure they get what they need. So I think that framing is important. We've met with all our coordinators of special education in schools and gone over this guidance. So I'm confident that we will be able to get to the families that need it, but it is a part of your question that's really important is the data behind the compensatory services and how we understand that data, because as you know, in the spring, there was a lot going on, right?
Yes.
And, very hard to figure out what that level of regression is, and who needs what and what the right thing to do about it is. So those will be subtle, complicated conversations, but we've given a fair amount of guidance to staff to try and make sure students get what we want. We're all interested in trying to make sure kids, are able to make the progress they need to make.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll be coming back to you on this one.
Sure.
I spent 16 years working at Perkins School for the Blind as a physical
Sure.
therapist, so it's an area of interest of mine. And
Mhm.
I know it's a very emotive issue for our parents and our families that the kids, the students that they keep up. And it's been a really difficult year. Yeah, so thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I'd look forward to talking more if you want.
I'd like that. Thank you. Madam Chair, I in the interest of time, I will hold any other questions for now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braden. Councillor Flynn? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sabi George. I just had two quick questions. The remote learning for students. I saw the percentage that was noted by neighborhood. I noticed Chinatown was not included in that. I know sometimes it is part of the South End area code, and at times it can be part of the downtown area code. Going forward, can we have a breakdown about students specifically in Chinatown? So I'd like to know exactly what is happening in my district.
Absolutely, Councillor Flynn. We will relay that feedback to our Office of Data and Accountability and see what can be done to pull the statistics specifically for Chinatown. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And then my final question, the presentation was excellent, informative. And I wanted to follow up kind of on what Councilor Braden highlighted. The issues of special education for ELL students is obviously a challenge, but factoring in, poverty, environmental challenges, remote learning, how are we going to make sure we provide the right services to students with disability, especially if their parents may not speak English? How are we going to communicate and make sure that they get the services, the support that they desperately need? And I highlighted the environmental challenges, thinking of Chinatown that has the highest asthma rate of any neighborhood in the city. But having said that, what can we do to help our parents in that situation so that they can make sure that their kids receive the best services as possible?
Sure, I would say a couple of things, and thank you, Councillor Flynn, for your continued advocacy on behalf of our students with disabilities, and particularly our ELs with disabilities. And I would also want to make sure Dr. Romero Johnson has a chance to chime in on this as well. There's both good news and bad news. Good news is that the way we've structured compensatory services, I think, will allow us to be really flexible for families. So it's not like you have to get your kid to this place to be able to do, say you have rules-based reading that you've determined that you need X number of hours of that. We will actually be able to implement that remotely. So on the one hand, that's a really good thing for a certain set of kids, and it will reduce transportation, and there's some good things about that. Obviously, there's also an issue with, we don't know when we're going to be able to offer in-person compensatory services. And so for many families, that's going to be a real challenge. And it will be up to the families to say, you know what, I'm going to wait. I want to wait until I have my compensatory services until it can be in person. And I certainly hope by summertime, we will be able to do that, and we'll be able to, lock in some long hours. But of course, we don't know what the virus is going to do. But we do believe that we will be able to be flexible with some of the time we're offering. But we also know it will be a challenge getting back to in-person for some of those students that really do desperately need that in-person piece. I'll let Dr. Romero Johnson speak to the ELs with disabilities, and particularly the language access piece around that and making sure they get what they need.
Certainly, the pandemic and the need to move into remote learning has highlighted the need for language support for both parents and students. Our office, in collaboration with the Office for Special Education, has implemented a variety of strategies and tech tools to help parents be able to access information in their home language. So in the last few slides in the deck, you will see a number of resources that we've added that have helped to some extent ameliorate the communication need. Certainly more needs to be done, and we're aware and collaborating in this area.
Thank you for that response to both of you. And I know I've spoken to the superintendent many times about this issue. I do appreciate the progress that has been being made. And my final question, as it relates to ethnic studies, would persons with disabilities be, would that be a subject that we might want to consider for ethnic studies? I just know that there's a lot of discrimination that happens in the world against persons with disabilities, and we don't often appreciate the hard work and sacrifice and determination that they make every day, making lives better for people. But is it possible to maybe at least factor in some of the contributions that persons with disabilities have made and set a positive example of what we can accomplish even with disabilities?
I'd love to chime in there and say that it's a question that I'd love to bring to the committee, both to the Ethnic Studies Now committee and to the Kanala Institute, and get input from our researcher experts. My initial sense is that the ethnic studies, really the project of ethnic studies that, that began, a couple of decades ago in the 60s, really is based in race-based oppressions. And so it may be considered a departure, but something that I would imagine that the committee will earnestly grapple with and figure out what we can do and where it might be best situated. I know that our Office of Equity in particular is in partnership with our Office of Special Education to certainly provide staff-based development and training around this very topic, but certainly having, as we look at creating a more inclusive district and breaking down the barriers around and really dismantling our substantially separate classrooms where they are unnecessary, that this will be an important part of learning for our students as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. as long as we have an opportunity, hopefully, to let students know that even with disabilities, there's a lot that can be accomplished, and there's also a lot of discrimination out there against persons with disabilities. But I do very much appreciate your willingness to work with us and work with me. Thank you, Councilor Sabi George, and thank you to the panelists for excellent work.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. And if I could just add to Councilor Flynn's question and comment, can we also make sure, this is just a statement, I don't need an answer, but let's make sure that students who are in sub-separate classrooms have access to the curriculum, to the ethnic studies curriculum, because they're often sort of left out of the full buffet of opportunities in our school settings. Next we have, I think Councilor Arroyo is gone, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you. So I do appreciate the thorough presentation. I'll say that just like everybody else has, all these formalities that up in here. But I will also say, while I'm here and have the floor, is that, I worked in the education space. And so this conversation is not new to me. And I feel like the only thing that changes is the characters who are now speaking. And so I really do appreciate the fact that we're all in again and making the commitment to our young people. But, I think it's important to name the fact that we had a social and emotional learning academic director, Amalio, years ago. And I feel like every time we have a new administration, it's still the same thing. And I feel like we have to reset and start all over again. And we just aren't moving fast enough. And I think that that's a frustration that a lot of Boston Public School parents and students are feeling. And so I think that whatever it is that we're going to say that we're going to do, that we have some updates on a regular basis, public updates in terms of like, here's what we said we were going to do 3 months ago, here's where we stand, and here's the results of these things, so that people can feel as though what they hear in these spaces actually translates into actual deliverables that they can say, oh, okay, it does make sense. Because right now, having been working in this project now for like a year since I got hired to be a counselor, I feel like people need more accountability, and I am looking forward to seeing what all this looks like when it gets put into action. So in terms of some of the questions that I have, it's more, I'm curious about feeding off of Councilor Sabi George's question about standards across all city schools. I'm wondering, I went to Boston Public Schools. My daughter attends a Boston Public School. And every school is uniquely different, and it depends on where you live. And the type of quality education dictates what that looks like based on your zip code. So how are you all able to ensure that all students across the entire district are going to be able to have access to a quality whole child educational experience? How are we going to do that? It sounds good, but I want to know the how, because the how dictates as to whether or not we're really able to do half of the things that I just heard today. So let's start with the how.
Councilor Mejia, thank you so much for your comments and your questions. And we share this feeling of urgency that we need to move faster because we can't get the time back for our students in classrooms. The how for us in particular right now, and looking at the brutal facts that we talked about in the presentation that you expanded on, and feel very personally in your experience, in your daughter's experience. First and foremost for us it is about making sure that we are clear about what high quality instructional materials look like in the classroom, and then providing that training, development, support, capacity building for our teachers, for our leaders, and also for our central office staff, so that we can have alignment around what it is that we're using in our classrooms and how we're supporting that. It is unfortunately a slow and steady process. So, we started first with our schools that are in transformation, our lowest performing 33 schools across the district, and providing really deep supports for them. Really reframing what we mean by reading pedagogy, so that we make sure that every single student is learning how to read based on the science of reading and has access to high quality reading instructional materials and literacy. That's one example of the very particular how we're going about doing that. You can see differences in training, differences in materials, differences in the actual lessons that are being delivered as a result of that. And I appreciate the push for accountability and for having a public dashboard that we can come back and share with you. And so we can see the deliverables and the progress together, and looking forward to doing that. Absolutely.
Thank you. Because I only have 5 minutes before I wish I had my own timer on so I can keep myself in check, but I'm going to ask one more question. And if I have any more time, I will come back and say some more. But I do have a question. It came from somebody in our audience. This is in regards to IEPs. My first, this is someone who reached out to our office regarding standards for IEP students. Can you explain the policy that is in place when a student on an IEP is not meeting their expected goals? Have IEPs been amended to change the goals for students?
I'm happy to chime in here, and thank you, Councillor Mejia, for the question. I'm glad we're getting questions from the audience as well. I think that the important point to make out there is that those are all team decisions. Certainly IEPs are generated by the team that comes together to write the IEP. So there's, those are sort of sacred conversations and decisions that are made at the team meeting. And certainly depending on data and how a child is doing will impact what the goals are at a team meeting. We want to have high expectations for all our students across the board. That's the most important thing. And we believe that all our students deserve to have high expectations and should be held to those high expectations.
Thank you. I'm going to try to keep things going just because I don't have a lot of time.
Councilor Mejia, we're well over time. We'll do another round afterwards. Councilor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to jump to the ethnic studies side of things. I just wondered if you all could speak a little bit more. I know that at the beginning of the year, we did definitely hear concern, as we've all alluded to, there was a ton of great work done by this committee of teachers out of the BTU. And I think a combination of excitement that this is finally happening and also, just anxiety that it be done right and that we have the kind of professional development support that this takes. So I was wondering if you could speak specifically to, I sort of understand where we are this semester, but in terms of those 5 courses rolling out over the spring and next fall, like how many classrooms are they being taught in? Like what's the sort of support that teachers who are teaching them would have? And then I guess the other question I have is sort of what is the contemplated next step beyond that? Because as I said in my opening comments, I think it's really important that ultimately ethnic studies be something that's sort of woven into all the curricula as we're talking about here. And some of that is just getting that perspective woven into all kinds of different grade levels. Some of it is making sure that these courses, to the extent the district, designs and perfects them, are available not only from a handful of teachers who might be most interested in them, but really are something that are available for our students across different schools. So I just want to kind of understand what the district understands to be the trajectory there. And also just add one more question, which is about kind of customization. I can imagine a world in which you have, a teacher's teaching one of these courses and they have a lot of Somali students that year, or they have like a lot of Dominican students that year. And there's you might be teaching a kind of pan Latin American history and ethnic studies course, but there's a desire for a more specific focus. And I wonder whether, because of the nature of ethnic studies and how it's woven with our students' experience, whether that aspect of things has been contemplated and planned for. So that's a set of questions, but that's my questions for this round.
And I can speak to that. Thank you very much, Councillor Bach, for the question. It's a great question. So as you mentioned, there are other courses in the works that are being developed by the Kanala Institute in partnership with the BTU Now teachers. And when our coach comes on board, we're in the midst of that hiring process now. That person will act as a liaison and as well as the coach for existing teachers and the person who would onboard new teachers into the curriculum. So those are all identity specific courses that will also become a part of the course catalog. And when something's part of the course catalog, all schools have access to it. But the caveat I would give here with ethnic studies is that we want to make sure that the teachers who are teaching it have a strong foundation in this work and an understanding of the import, right, of what they're doing. So right now, and what we would like to continue to do is any teacher or school is interested in starting ethnic studies, there's a requirement that they go through a 20-hour course that's taught by Kanala and the BTU teachers. We stipend those teacher leaders to teach the course, to make sure that teachers are ready for the kinds of questions and challenges that come up. And also, to your point, to be ready to make the adjustments that are needed. The intro course and the subsequent courses too are very much based in student identity in the classroom. So they are very specific and place-based. And that has been, I will acknowledge, part of the rub, right? In trying to codify something that is so specific to a community, that there has been a challenge there, right? And some wariness to codifying it as a district, right? But we want to continue to have that option, and really that is central to the course, that the course is based in the students who are there, in their identities and their experiences.
Great. And just in terms of trajectory scale wise, like how many are teaching in the first cohort? Like where do we see that scaling up to?
Right, so it started with 6 classrooms in 6 schools, and then this summer 20 new teachers were trained. So we have those 20 classrooms additionally that are teaching it. There are more classrooms that want to join on in the spring. It is a semesterized course, so they can start the introductory course in the spring as well. So it's growing, and there is considerable interest across our high schools, and like as I said, our middle schools and even elementary schools too. So that's part of the trajectory, is to think about the middle school version of this, to also build out opportunities in elementary schools for students to start to have these experiences in their ELA and history courses too.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. I have a quick question, sort of a half of a follow-up question. I want to make sure that we have that common and consistent curriculum across the district, across all grade levels. Where is there a place that we are going to see where those inequities are around common and consistency? Can we see that anywhere? And who's in charge of making sure that common and consistent is the practice? My understanding is the district no longer has content leaders or content superintendents. I don't know whether that's accurate. And then related, but not directly, just so I can get the question out there, are we tracking right now, especially during this time of remote learning and mostly remote learning, are we tracking student progress and failures? I got an email over the weekend or the last couple of days from one of my boys' school about an increase in failures in that school, but they're saying that it's potentially lower than maybe what other schools are experiencing. Who's tracking that piece? Because it is certainly related to academic success and accessing and being engaged in the curriculum and in their learning. A couple of quick questions there.
Quick biggies. So I'll briefly just share that in terms of consistency across the district, I think for the most part, if this team had its druthers, we would wave a magic wand and magic pen and ensure that all schools had adopted the same curriculum across the board that was high quality and CLSP aligned. One of the challenges that we're working with our colleagues in the Accountability Office is around the various types of autonomies that have either been granted or have just sort of organically proliferated across the district across probably the last 10 to a dozen years. So figuring out with school leaders and with folks in accountability what the right dimensions are of those autonomies and how they can be potentially earned, so that we can find the, sort of the right balance of autonomy and accountability is really important to us. Our piece of that right now is ensuring that we have strong processes in place and that we've identified high quality, vetted, culturally and linguistically sustaining practices embedded in that curriculum, and that we've really just clearly stated for folks what those are, and that we're providing the right kinds of support so that teachers can implement them with a high degree of fidelity. In terms of where the inconsistencies are, I really would love to track the public to the DESE report. They viewed so many hundreds of classrooms through the winter, and that report that was issued, I think in March, which is available on the DESE website, really gives you even a sense of what quality instruction was in grade bands. So you'll see things like, students and they used a consistent tool called the class tool to rate all the instruction that they saw. So that will actually give you a really good picture of what those inconsistencies are in the curriculum, and then also how it impacts instruction and student learning. In terms of the content leaders, our academics and professional learning team is a robust team with many specialists providing content-based support. I'll let Christine talk a little bit more about her team in particular, and just share that we are moving to a teacher-led model that you heard Shakira talk about as well. So that's a partnership that is developing and flourishing with our teacher leaders.
Yeah, thanks. So I think part of confronting the brutal facts is really examining our failure to implement. In the past, as Councilor Mejia said, there have been many good ideas and similar ideas that have come up, but they haven't fully been implemented. And I think to that point, we have made some changes to the academics team, the academics and professional learning team specifically, to better support teachers. Because our feedback from teachers wasn't where it needed to be either, right? So we have adjusted the work of our team while it's still focused in content specific teams. Their work has moved from writing curriculum to supporting teachers in implementing curriculum. So they still spend some of their time in the development piece and the interactions with partners, all of the work of a team leader. But at least 60 to 80% of their time is focused specifically on teacher support and teacher team support in schools.
Great. And then a quick response perhaps for tracking of failures, the increase in failures this school year.
Yes, so our Office of Data and Accountability and our school superintendents really are looking at that data much more closely than this team. That said, I'll say that it certainly is happening. In particular, coming up, we'll be looking at 11th and 12th graders as we get closer to graduation, and ensuring that they have the courses that they need completed, satisfactorily completed, so that they can move toward graduation.
Great, thank you. And that's my time. Councilor Braden, any more questions for this panel? Councilor Bach, any more questions for this panel?
No, I mean, yes, the panel is presented on an enormous quantity of things, but in the interest of time, I'll hold mine for now. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I skipped Councilor Janey and then Councilor Mejia. Councilor Janey?
Quick question. I was wondering if I could have an update on 8th grade algebra.
Yes, we love the question. Christine, do you want to share a little bit about the recent work?
Yes, absolutely. So we are continuing to do quite a bit of work in the math department. We started with high school and we've actually made some great inroads in high school with our courses and common curriculum. There are a few different options, but there's more common curriculum in the high school and in math than we had several years ago. And
so do all 8th grade students now have access? Are all 8th grade students taking 8th grade algebra?
Not yet. So we are working toward that and ensuring sort of.
Would you say what percentage are?
I can get you that data. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you, Counselor Janey. And then a quick question, Counselor Mejia.
Yeah, so I do have a quick question. I wish I had more time because there's so many questions to be asked. I'm just curious in terms of ethnic studies. Are you guys partnering with local artists, storytellers, and poets and performers to help design this curriculum? And I'm also just curious about the parents who don't speak English and what your level of engagement has been to help include them in this process for your curriculum development efforts. And quickly, like basic, like sound bites here before they cut me off again.
So I'd say very quickly that yes, there for the introductory course and the courses that are being developed, there is considerable outreach to local artists and the community from the Kanala Institute and from the teachers team too. And then teachers have thought a lot about how to include families in the curriculum. Can't get too deeply into that in a short amount of time, but that is a very much embedded in the curriculum.
It's not going to be like an other, right? Like the ethnic studies is going to be part of everything that our kids learn in the classroom. It's not going to be like an other situation. It's going to be embedded in everything that they learn, or is it like, what's it going to look like in terms of rollout?
Yeah, so it's a history course right now, the way it's being taught for 9th grade or 8th grade as well. And then the future courses will be continuations of that, but they're core history classes.
I'll just add on there that in adopting the culturally and linguistically sustaining practices framework as a district, the intention is that every single one of our lessons is adjusted so that our students' identity is centered in that lesson. And so that is our expectation across the board in every grade level, frankly, in every lesson every day.
You'll be happy to know I'll yield the rest of whatever time I have left. I'll stop you.
Thank you, Counselor Mejia, and thank you to the all the panelists in this group here for being with us and for delivering that very, again, I like getting into the weeds, so I appreciate the deep and thorough presentation. There's a lot going on in the district. There's a lot of great things going on in the district, and y'all work and our work is to limit and eliminate or minimize and then eliminate the impacts of any inconsistencies, any inequities that exist in our schools and through the curriculum for today's conversation. And I think in our next panel, we'll talk a lot more, get into greater detail on the ethnic studies. So I appreciate all of you. I know that a few of you will stay on, but I'm going to take you off of this screen and welcome in our second panel. So yeah, if you're in our second panel, say again.
Just thank you so much,
Council.
Council.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Chief. Thank you for being with us. And I'm going to promote some new folks in, and then I'm going to knock you guys out to get some room here. Bye, Andrea.
Bye-bye all. Thanks. Take care and stay safe.
All right, so I think that I've got everybody. If you're supposed to be on this second panel, would you please just raise your hand in case I've missed you? But I see Katie, I see Johnny, Shanae, and Janelle. Right. The other two are coming. Very good. And I think I now have everybody at least coming into the room that should be in the room for this second panel, and then afterwards we'll get to some public testimony that I know people are hoping to give. I appreciate your patience. I know that this has been a long session for you, and we did get started late. I just want to first, as I introduce all of you, or have you introduce yourself, if that's okay. I just want to thank Katie for joining me on Friday afternoon for, I think, a really thoughtful and thought-provoking and maybe even a little bit emotional for me conversation around ethnic studies and the important role it plays for our kids across the district. And I think the important role it plays regardless of racial identity and ethnic identity. So I'm going to actually start with you, Katie, if you'd like to introduce yourself. I know that you're also on a limited time, and then we'll go through the rest of the panel. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. Would it be all right if I shared my screen? Because we actually have.
Yeah, it would be fine. Go right ahead.
Okay, so I think that Shanae is actually going to introduce all of us.
Perfect. Oh, there we go. We'll start with Shanae.
I'm going to just go ahead into presentation mode. Hopefully you can see that.
It's loading. Yep, there it is.
Okay, great.
So Shanae will start.
I will. First of all, good evening. Thank you, Chair, for having us. Thank you, council members. We are very happy to be here. My name is Shanae Paulino. I'm a current BPS teacher at Charlestown High School. I am also a member of the Ethnic Studies Now committee, along with Katie Lee. And we have Johnny McInnes joining us today, who is the Boston Teachers Union Political Director. So before Katie and I start our presentation, Johnny is going to give some opening remarks, and then we will move forward.
Thank you, Shanae. Greetings, Councilor Asabi George, President Janey, and Councilors Breeden, Bach, Mejia, and Flynn. I wanted to talk a little bit about my experiences in BPS. So my statement today, I also want to add, I taught music, so a lot of this that I'm talking about as a music teacher in Boston is from my experiences. And my statement today is about the need to support an ethnic studies curriculum in Boston Public Schools. The BTU has been involved with growing this program. This is important because it helps close learning gaps, brings culturally relevant content and pedagogy to classrooms. My teaching career began at the Matterhorn Elementary School, where I had the opportunity to teach students whose families were from Greece, Somalia, and several Latin American countries. I even taught band and recorder in a Saturday program to BPS students whose families were from China for several years. The students at the Matterhorn were in the Sheltered English Immersion program and were supported in their classroom exclusively by educators who spoke their native language. The students taught in the Chinatown community continued their day after leaving me for music class in the morning to a program that supported their Chinese culture. I open with this because based on these experiences, I observed with English language learners, a culturally relevant curriculum like ethnic studies is important. I've always been an advocate for closing the opportunity and achievement gap through culturally relevant curriculum and supporting teacher diversity in Boston Public Schools. The SEI program was lost due to a state ballot question to communities that don't represent the same diverse communities as Boston. Since the district hasn't focused on making sure we make a plan to recruit, retain, and support educators in a way that supports students from their ethnic background. As a union, we have been fighting for ethnic studies in our contract negotiations and our participation in the Black Lives Matter at Schools Week of Action. In the last round of contract negotiations, we won a commitment to ethnic studies from the district. Happy to see that commitment reaffirmed in the strategic plan. We are proud of our members who have stepped up, gone above and beyond, often uncompensated, to move ethnic studies forward in the district. These are the actions that are felt by educators and students and that have an impact. We're asking for a commitment from the district. Those commitments consist of funding, making all commitments sustainable, and not just buzzwords that we hear. We also need to keep educators, students, and other stakeholders at the center. Educators need to be the ones writing curriculum, leading professional development with ethnic groups represented, coaching each other, etc. We don't need to outsource it, but we need support from the district to make it sustainable. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Next slide, Katie. So Katie and I have 4 main objectives for our presentation this evening. Our first objective is to review the Boston Ethnic Studies Visions and Frameworks. We're going to review the Boston Teachers Union Ethnic Studies Now implementation proposal for this year. We're going to summarize ethnic studies work, and then we will discuss next steps. And we wanted to start out with this slide because in order to have a conversation about ethnic studies, we first need to be grounded in a common understanding of the vision and the frameworks. So what you're seeing on your screen right now is actually the work of many BPS teachers. They created this framework in conjunction, in partnership with many other outside groups who are also connected with ethnic studies work. And they created these frameworks to frame the curriculum that you've been hearing up until this point and perhaps knew about prior. And I am one of the teachers that is piloting the ethnic studies curriculum inside of my classroom this year. So I'm at Charlestown High School. And so I am teaching this curriculum to 11th and 12th graders. And I can speak from experience and say that the ethnic studies frameworks really do allow students to feel a sense of liberation and affirmation as to who they are. I remember specifically after doing one activity where students had to simply reflect on different aspects of their identity and then have a discussion about that reflection with another peer. And just the act of reflecting on their identity was so liberating to many of my students. And we believe that the type of feeling that my students have experienced, and I'm just one classroom, the type of feeling that my students have experienced is really the type of healing that we believe needs to be commonplace in classrooms, in livelihood, in how we interact with people. So we know that many of you city councilors have endorsed the proposal that we created back in September. So while the endorsement is much longer than what you see on this screen, we just wanted to highlight some of the main points of the proposal as being the importance of including stakeholders in the decision-making process, also in the support of the ethnic studies curriculum, and in the funding for the ethnic studies instructional coach and coordinator, as well as professional development, curricular development, and for community partnerships.
So what I'm about to talk about is the work that teachers have actually been doing in the district. And I want to be clear that the work that I'm about to share is work that teachers have actually been doing, the majority of it, probably 90% of it, on their own time without being paid by the district at all. And I want to say that because I think that we need to be clear about sort of like where we want to hold the district accountable about what they need to do in order to make this institutionalized and sustainable in the future. So the 4 areas that we've been working on, one is around curriculum development, right? So I am still part of a group of people who, five teachers who wrote a pilot curriculum for Intro to Ethnic Studies curriculum through the history department. And that relationship was severed when the BPS history department was defunded and now disbanded, right? So there actually is no sort of communication between that curriculum development group that we continue to meet every week, right? And BPS at this point. There's no communication between us. We've created a website to house the Intro to Ethnic Studies curriculum on our own time also. Created case studies, right, to look at specific groups of local groups in Boston to use within our frameworks. And we've also applied for a grant, an outside grant, also another outside grant that specifically will be writing Black Studies curriculum. We've been doing teacher training and support. So we ran 2 full-day district-wide ethnic studies PDs for BPS teachers. We ran 3 PLCs. Those are professional learning communities from March 2019 throughout the summer. That is 20+ hours of PD training. Assistant Superintendent Landry did talk about how people were stipended. I was one of the people who ran the PLCs, and the 3 of us, we have not seen that. We have not seen the stipends. Like that is also another point of contention, I think, right now. That a lot of things have been promised, and yet the actual work is being done by teachers still on their own time at this point. We ran a train the trainers workshop to train teachers to teach the PLC in their own schools. We've held bi-weekly spaces to gather feedback and support for teachers using the pilot curriculum on Saturdays, right, for an hour and a half every other week that Shanae's been part of. And we designed and ran many different teach-ins, one of which was a No Thanksgiving teach-in that we recently ran about 2 weeks ago. Another bucket that we've been working on is around coordination, vision, and implementation. So we put forth vision statements and frameworks for ethnic studies in BPS. That was developed mainly through that history department outside grant, where teachers were stipended very small amounts of money to sort of work with this outside, to work with a consultant from San Francisco Unified School District to create those visions and frameworks. We wrote a detailed ethnic studies budget for this particular year for the school district. We said, these are the exact things that you actually need to pay for in order to make this sustainable for this pilot year. We wrote the 2 job descriptions that we thought would be necessary for this year for them, one of which was posted as a 0.5 position. The full-time position actually hasn't been posted yet. It was posted as a 0.5 position online, and people applied for it as a 0.5 position. We have collected the information of more than 100+ teachers who are interested in teaching this course, either within Boston or beyond Boston. And we actually haven't had the capacity to actually onboard all of those teachers, given the amount of volunteer hours that we have only been able to do. Beyond BPS, we have also communicated with various community organizations about the work that we've done, including Sociedad Latina, BCNC, the Cape Verdean Heritage Language Program, Facing History in Ourselves. And we've also collaborated with UMass Boston's Boston Through a Wider Lens training for teachers. We've also been involved with a state coalition of people who are exploring the idea of ethnic studies on a statewide level. To be clear, again, the things that you see in bold are the only things that teachers have actually been paid for as of to date. All of those things have been outside grants, have not actually been within the BPS budget. A lot more information is on these 2 websites that we've built, and I encourage you to look more onto them. And I really wanted to provide that in context. This slide is really for context, right? So we made the proposal for implementation in May 2020, well before the school year started, with the points that many of you had signed on to. I'm not going to review the right-hand column. The right-hand column is all the actions that we've done in order to support this proposal for implementation of ethnic studies in the district. The teachers have done, right? In terms of BPS actions, they did convene a group of B2 Ethnic Studies Now teachers and Canala directors for summer 2020. That working group disbanded when the school year began. That summer coordinator contract ended. They did very recently started convening a hiring committee in December 2020, very recently, inclusive of BTU Ethnic Studies teachers and Canala directors. They've posted for a 0.5 FTE position in October 2020. And this is also really important to think about, right? Because most of what happens during the summer is that teachers plan, right? That's when teachers actually plan. They plan during summers and breaks, because that's the only time you really have to plan for a large overview course. And right now it's been very delayed in hiring a coach, and a coordinator position hasn't been hired or hasn't been posted and isn't in the plans for right now, even though that is something that we are very much thinking that the pilot curriculum really needs, the pilot year really needs. And in May 2020, they also contracted with Canala, and the contract was promised for this year to do. And we have worked with Boston Through a Wider Lens, again, as of right now on our own time. We have not been paid for that amount of time that we've worked. So one of the frames that we use actually in our curriculum is something that I want to introduce right now. And I want to use it as in a way to talk about the connection between a student in a classroom and this Boston City Council, right? This is a framework that is based on John Bell's 4 Eyes of Oppression. If you look at the very top where the leaves are, imagine a student who has internalized the negative beliefs about themselves, about schooling. Maybe believing that they aren't smart enough to succeed in school. Maybe they don't believe they deserve to be in school at all. These feelings may have come from interpersonal relations with their teachers or people at the school they attend, but often in our analysis, we just stop there. We stop at thinking that at the school level and at teacher level, that's where we can make a difference in the lives of students. And it's important to sort of move down that trunk and understand sort of why that student might have internalized those feelings. If you move down into the trunk and into the roots, you really begin to understand that that internalization is actually deeply rooted in societal beliefs and institutions. For example, I was a teacher that had to teach MCAS every single year. And that is something that can't be controlled for teachers or students, especially for students who have only been in the country for 2 years and expecting to pass it, right? Nor is things like housing or income stability, things in which schools can actually control. And all these things, all these things have a huge impact and influence on whether or not a student feels like they can actually succeed or are worthy of success in schools. I think that we think that Boston City Council has quite a lot of power over institutions in the city. And that kind of power might confirm or refute the internalized beliefs of a student in classroom thinking that they're not good enough. We wanted to use this frame of the tree and this analogy and take this out of curriculum and show it to you because we wanted to make a direct connection to sort of the power, the institutional power over students' lives and experiences.
So as we're hoping that this can be a continued dialogue between city councilors and the Ethnic Studies Now committee, we're really hoping that these two questions can be the foundation for our further conversation. So the first question that we would like to ask to city councilors is, how can you use the power of your position to make ethnic studies in BPS a reality? Followed secondly by, how do you envision the fight for ethnic studies fitting within the broader vision for social justice in the city of Boston? And that is where our presentation ends. So we're happy to go back and forth with question and answer.
No, I love it. Thank you. I think that's a beautiful transition to our conversation this evening with all of you. So I'm grateful for this presentation and for the work that all of you have been doing to make ethnic studies a reality, albeit a very small reality at this moment in time, but hopefully a larger reality soon. My question for all of you is something that concerned me in our earlier presentation by the district, and some of the conversation that we've had here is this conversation around this ethnic studies course or class, where really when we talk about it as a curriculum, it is interwoven into everything that we do. I appreciate, as a former classroom teacher that has worked on specialized programs, that sometimes you do have to introduce something as a standalone course initially. But I really want to understand how do we move from presentation and your work as a committee to making sure that it is strung across all of our across our curriculum, so it truly is part of the curriculum, not just simply a standalone course. That's for anybody.
I think that's really important to first think about what it would mean to mandate ethnic studies, because it's happened in other states and other localities. And when you mandate something like ethnic studies for teachers who are, one, maybe not wanting to teach it, or two, not ready to teach it, it can actually be more damaging than it is helpful. And I think that that's really important to say because it's happening in other states and other cities right now. Having said that, I think that's really important to sort of build, we've thought as a committee, it's really important to build infrastructure at the same time that you're sort of institutionalizing all this at the same time, right? So the model has been small and deep and grow from there, right? People have to be really grounded in what they teach and how they teach it, because ethnic studies is very much about pedagogy first, than it is about frameworks and content. It is about frameworks and content, but is very much about pedagogy first, how you teach students, right? So unless teachers are really grounded in that, they actually can't teach other teachers to do it. That one person in the district, even if they hire the coach, which we're saying that they need to, we're saying they're hiring a corner, even if they hire those people can't be the experts for the entire district. It has to be teachers learning from each other. And in order to do that, people actually have to be really grounded in it. And so I think that, yes, absolutely. Our vision for the long term is that ethnic studies is in every single classroom. But how you get there, I think, is not just a blanket, like it needs to happen now, right? And so I think that Shanae can talk about it a little bit more too, I think, because she's been grappling sort of with even the curriculum this year, right?
I'm curious what the role is of teacher education programs, because if it's embedded there, then teachers are coming out of school with it part of their initial training.
Yeah, I think it's a similar question, right? So like I think you have to run it in a few teacher programs and make it work and make it like a very solid program before you start spreading it, right? Ethnic studies is a discipline. I don't think people understand it, right? That it's not just like you can just throw it to someone and say, here's a curriculum, go teach it.
Right.
It's a very deep discipline that has its own sort of methodologies, has its own pedagogies, right? And so you can't just say, here, teacher education program, you teach this, right? Like it has to actually, that's why we actually have been asking for the district to do a pilot model. And, unfortunately, the classrooms in which it is piloted right now, the teachers aren't getting any support, no formal support in the curriculum development, in the curriculum implementation.
Thank you, Kay. Shanae, if you've got something to add, and then I'll move to colleagues for questions.
I will add that in response to you mentioning that there has to be more than just a standalone curriculum and that ethnic studies should be embedded into all content areas, I agree with what Katie is mentioning. And that is happening already within the teachers who are teaching the curriculum. So, and there are a handful of teachers who are not necessarily teaching the curriculum teaching the curriculum to the T, but rather they are using the ethnic studies frameworks that we mentioned at the beginning in the content that they are teaching.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make that statement that it is already happening.
Great. I mean, I think right there, that's a huge win when teachers are taking components of it and including it across disciplines to begin with. Right. Thank you very much. Councilor Janey.
Thank you. And thank you to this panel. I'm really grateful for the work that you've put into this. And to answer your questions, I think this is very important. This is at the center of a lot of my work on the City Council. I'm curious, though, to hear your thoughts and your ideas around just building upon what Councilor Sabi George said in her remarks, because that's been my concern, that this is a one-off elective course. It's a pilot. It is not a decolonized curriculum that the school committee has already agreed it would put forth or allow the school department to put forth through its opportunity and achievement gap policy back in 2016. And I have deep concerns, in fact, that ethnic studies sprinkles on, good information, good history that I want to celebrate and affirm of different ethnic groups, Black studies, Asian studies, Latin studies, all very important, but it's sprinkled on top of a curriculum that continues to center whiteness. And so even as we heard from the earlier panel, who talked about how students in the classes, and there's so much enthusiasm and excitement from young people and the educators teaching the class, and that's great to hear. But they talked about a lot of the readings being around different resistance movements. That is incredibly important history. We know a lot of it in this country, and there's a lot of important movements around the world. But those movements, again, are usually centered around white oppression. So again, we continue to center whiteness and the European experience and not decolonize the curriculum. So my question really for this group is how we take this amazing work that you guys have started and really do get to the point where it's embedded throughout and we are moving toward. And I know it doesn't happen overnight, I know it took 2 years just to kind of get to this pilot stage with little support, hardly any support, if I've heard the presentation correctly, financial or otherwise. And so it's incredible that we've come this far, but I'm really interested in how we get to the next step, because I worry that this doesn't really go far enough. And I think there are a lot of good readings out there. There's a lot of important research. I'm sure you guys are already kind of in the thick of it, but just how we get away from sprinkling some otherness onto what is already being centered versus just taking that, turning it on its head, and really decolonizing the curriculum.
And Counselor Janey, I think we share your worry. The thing with ethnic studies is that everyone wants to implement it because they think that it will increase test scores and increase MCAS scores, increase graduation rates. So those are all side effects of a curriculum like this or of ethnic studies. The real purpose of ethnic studies is humanization, right? It's about really connecting with one's own identity and community. And so we know that most teachers, if not the general populace, has never taken an ethnic studies course. No one's had the opportunity to really, right? And so we knew that going into coming out of writing that curriculum, we knew that we could never just hand it to anyone and just say, teach. And so we said we needed to sort of develop a training where teachers essentially take an ethnic studies course. And so the course that we've developed for teachers, this PD, is not so much a training to teach the actual course, or it's not like a regular training where you would normally, like, I think regular teacher trainings, you would say like, oh, here's the curriculum, here's like, let me explain this to you, like all this. It's not, it's actually like a lot of the course is, I would say like 95% of the course is them teaching, almost taking it as students, right? This ethnic studies course. And so it's like very deep personal work, emotional work of sort of like unpacking yourself, your own story, holding that against other people's stories, looking at it for patterns, and figuring out how to move from there. And so a lot of that has to be done. It is not like you take 20 hours of something, you're like, oh, I got it. Like I'm ready to teach too. That like, that's also not how it happens. And so we know that it also includes sort of like this ongoing space for people to undo the years and years of hegemony, years and years of things that they've normalized into their everyday lives, right? So the teachers that we've trained, at this point, we've trained about 27 teachers, right? In 3 professional learning communities, we're about to start our 4th one in a couple weeks. And we're in relationship with them. Ethnic studies is relational. You can't just take this curriculum, take the training, and then go teach it. You actually have to be in community with people in order to teach it, right? And so that is part of it, is like building that community. That's what we're trying to do right now. On a, I would say shoestring, but there's no string at all. There's no, like on a zero budget right now. That's what we're trying to do, which essentially is sort of like where ethnic studies grew out of, right? Those are the movements that it grew out of.
I mean, I guess the fact, again, that we're talking about an elective, that we're talking about it within this framework, to me, reinforces the challenge that I'm trying to get us away from. And again, it's this add-on, it's this extra, it's this, this might be important. You might think this is interesting. If you might be one of these individuals who fit into one of those categories. And what we know from all the research is that this is important, not just for young people to see themselves, but it is important for everyone to understand the truth. And so everyone benefits when we are true about telling these stories. And again, I'm just worried that our framework for having the kind of conversation as an elective and not an overhaul of the entire curriculum is problematic. It reinforces, again, otherness. And I don't want us to reinforce otherness. I think that's what we need to dismantle. And so I'd be really interested in your thoughts. And again, these are big questions and they're complex issues. So I appreciate that it will require much more thinking on all of our parts. But as folks who are on the front lines of really forcing educators and Boston Public Schools to think about this and to hold the district accountable for moving in this direction, I would really be interested in your thoughts about how we just take it to these next steps.
And the timer did go off, so if you
I apologize.
That's okay. If you could answer that quickly, Katie, and then we'll move to Counselor Bach, and we can
Hey, I
do
don't
it
know if you have some thoughts about that.
I was going to say yes. That those are big questions. In short, though, I will say that I think it goes beyond. I think what ethnic studies offers for teachers who go through the PLC is really a lot of work about themselves, and it brings teachers to a place where they understand on a personal level the importance of this kind of work. And the conversation around anti-racism, anything connected to ethnic studies. So I think that teachers having gone through these PLCs can be a part of the group of people who bring that conversation into other spaces, into their school. So I think it's really just about having conversations about ethnic studies, even with people who might not necessarily be teaching it or might not necessarily have an interest. I think it's always bringing up the conversation in spaces that you're in.
Thank you, Counselor Janie. Thank you both for that. I also think that the students also bring it with them into all of those their other spaces. Counselor Bach?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much to the presenters, not just for your presentation tonight, but for the years of work on this. Two questions. One is, I wondered if we could hear, sorry, the way my view is, I can only see Counselor Asabi George right now. Shanae, if you could speak just a little bit more about what are the lessons learned so far. I mean, I think the benefit of a pilot, as you've been discussing, is the opportunity to sort of figure out how we're going to scale this and how to be thoughtful about it. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about the experience of teaching it this year, and specifically what kind of supports we need. I mean, we've talked about some of them, but I just think about the sort of added social and emotional support that might be needed. I mean, obviously for our students going through this pandemic, but also just some of the issues that are raised when you really dig in an ethnic studies curriculum in a real way, precisely because as Council President Janie says, of how colonized the rest of our curriculum still is. And so I wondered if you could speak about that. And then I wondered if folks could talk a little bit more from your perspective doing this work about that shift in the history department and sort of breakup of the history department at BPS and what that looks like for you as educators. Because one thought that I was having as you were having the prior conversation is just that there's sort of two pieces here. Like ethnic studies is a discipline, a specific way of teaching and looking at things. And I think there is sort of a separate question, but it's not unrelated about what history we teach and how. And it does seem to me that even though we can't necessarily get ethnic studies into all of our classrooms at the drop of the hat, and we need teachers to be well trained in how to teach it, we could have history curricula across the board, across our grades, that are more informed by an ethnic studies lens in the sense of, what are they selecting? What are the texts? What are the moments of history that we're focused on? And it seems to me like a well-constituted sort of BPS system history department could be the format for that type of curricular transfer and kind of attitudinal transfer. And so the sense that that's maybe doesn't really exist for us right now is concerning to me. So I would just love to hear a little bit more about that from your guys' perspective as teachers. So those are my two questions, both a little bit more about what the pilots look like on the ground from your teacher perspective, and then a bit about that issue with the department, because that seems to me like a structural question to your first question about what we counselors can try to work on and tackle. Obviously, central admin staffing stuff is part of the budget conversations that we have every year. So thank you.
So I can start by responding to your question about the curriculum in the classroom. So, and I understand you're asking me to give you like experience about how the curriculum has impacted students. Is that right?
Well, more like, you know, I mean, you're obviously somebody who thought a lot about this before you went and taught it. And it seems like most of the people who are teaching it are in that category. But I'm wondering what are the like learnings that are coming out of the pilot? Like, what are the unanticipated things, or like the ways in which it feels like it needs tweaking or better resourcing, or just like things you didn't know until we started running this pilot phase?
Mm-hmm. So I think some learnings that came out of the curriculum so far, and I will say that the curriculum is 3 units, and based off of how virtual learning is right now in my school, and the level of depth that my students have gone into, I'm barely getting into unit 2. That's because unit 1 is all about having students really connect with their identity and their background and their culture, their family, ancestry. And I can say that some learnings that have come out of unit 1 have been mostly around students just being, I can't even think of the word, encouraged, inspired, ignited, reflective of what they've learned about themselves through conversations with their family members. So one of our activities is to have students interview their family members or people who connect with them racially or ethnically, and ask them questions about their background so that they can then analyze that and think about how that influences how they think about themselves. And so that process alone, and then we have students do a video talking about what they learned from that activity. And that process alone really showed me how you could hear how students were recording themselves in the video, that they were continuing to be like, oh, I know, yeah, I learned this too. And like they were talking and analyzing out loud. So that's one small example of the type of learning that is happening for students through this curriculum in the classroom.
Shanae, maybe what kind of supports you feel like you need in order to do this well?
So definitely, I think we need to have more than one teacher in the classroom. I think that's because, especially, I mean, in-person learning, definitely, as well as in virtual learning, I have found that I have been very aware of what types of lessons to teach, when to teach them based off of how many students I'm going to have, and determine and trying to think about things like, what is this lesson going to bring up for students? Am I going to have the time to meet with students one-on-one if they need to have conversations? Thankfully, up until this point, it's worked out. I have been able to meet with students one-on-one who have been needing to have further conversations, but definitely we need to have co-teachers.
Thank you for that. We've hit the timer here with Councilor Bach. Councilor Mejia?
Sure. Thank you. I'm really excited to see this panel. So here for all of it, and really do appreciate all the work that you have done. I do have several questions. I'm just curious in terms of, I was startled to hear that this was all done with very little support from the district. And so, yeah, I'm curious as we start thinking about the way we do business in Boston. I just want to go on the record that we need to do a better job at advocating for budgets that encourage the type of design thinking programs that we've heard from Katie, and the kind of the process and how you all went about getting here, from parents, teachers, students, and anyone who was involved in creating the ethnic studies needs to be compensated for their amazing work, period, right? We always expect parents to show up as volunteers or to come to the table, but then we don't provide them any stipends. But everybody else who's sitting up in that space is getting paid. And I think the fact that you all have done this with very little compensation, it speaks volumes to your commitment, but it also speaks volumes to the way we can do better in Boston to build on equity. So I'm here to help and work with you all to make that a reality. And so then just two questions that I have. One is, I talked about the other in the classrooms with the previous administration panel, and I'm just curious, like from your perspective, what can we do so that we can see ethnic studies across all of our classrooms, from English, history, and science, et cetera, so it just doesn't live as a one-off. I'd like to know how we can incorporate some of the learning in different classes. And then I also would like to know how you all are thinking of partnering up with local artists, storytellers, poets, and performers to help design the curriculum. Like, what role do they play in helping to shape that? And I believe the administration said the current proposal for ethnic studies is for 8th and 9th graders. And I would just love to get your thoughts on that age group and whether or not you see room for this program for younger students. And I did ask all my questions within time.
In terms of getting things into different classes, I think the way that we've approached it is that ethnic studies will be taught if teachers know how to teach it, right? So while we're, and it's silly, right, to think about it that way, but it's like the people who are the foot soldiers are the teachers, right? And so the teachers actually need to be trained. And when they're trained and they're in community with each other to do this work, they are our roots for this curriculum and for this work, right? From there, I think Shanae mentioned it, from there, people who are in certain buildings are then known for that kind of work. And it spreads from there in these sort of localities, right? I think sometimes we think about like the district as a thing, and really it's like, often it's like school-based, it's very school-based, right? Or classroom-based, and then it becomes school-based, right? So that's sort of like how we've been thinking about it, is that we need to train teachers deeply about this work. They need to try it within their schools. They need to train other teachers, which is why we did a train the trainers for teachers, right? So people who took the PLC with us, they took a train the trainers course so that they could run it for people that they actually work with in their school sites. And that's actually the most powerful, because when there's a block of teachers that can actually teach it in a school, then it becomes a part of the school culture, right? And then more teachers actually want to incorporate that into the classroom. In terms of artists and things like that, like to incorporate it into the curriculum, I think there's absolute room for that. Again, I think we have to think about ethnic studies as the main thing is pedagogy, right? The main thing is like how you talk to students, how you're in relation with them. The second thing is about frameworks. So we have frameworks that you could actually bring in any sort of case studies, whether that's artists, whether that's like certain communities experiences, whether that's certain historical events. You can bring any of that into your classroom, into these frameworks that we've built for the curriculum, right? So like Shanae talking about like identity and talking about family interviews, it really depends on who you have in front of you for that. And we're talking about frameworks, like even looking at this 4 eyes, the thing that's on the screen right now, really, we can look at any case study, historical or current, to apply to this, right? And so it's part of it is like teaching students to read the world and not just text, not just books, right? But to read their own world through different lenses, through different frameworks, right? So absolutely, artists can be brought in. I think it's like through those frameworks, right? And the third is around 9th and 10th graders. Yeah, I'm curious about what about the district and talking about 8th grade and 9th grade classrooms that are being piloted. I'm not aware of any 8th grade classrooms that are piloting. We have the names of all the teachers that and have been in contact with all the teachers that have access to the curriculum at all. And I don't know of any 8th grade teachers that are teaching it. Shanae, I don't know if you know either. No, there are a few. Shanae teaches 12th grade English. She teaches English. She doesn't teach a class called ethnic studies, but she's integrating that into her English classroom, right? There are a couple of teachers that literally have ethnic studies as their course description, are teaching the curriculum. There are also teachers that have ethnic studies in the district in their title, and they're not teaching the curriculum and not linked with the curriculum, right? And so there's a lot of sort of like implementation, sort of coordination stuff that needs to happen on a district level that isn't really happening right now.
So my last question is just a quick follow-up in terms of just the role that the district has played and what recommendations you have for a better process in terms of their level of engagement. What would be some recommendations you would have?
I think an ongoing meeting with folks and maybe compensating them for that, right? Like would be helpful. I think that, we've actually outlined a line by line budget for them on our website. You can find it on our website. And we've said, this is what we think is the money that would take for this year. It includes compensation of community organizations. It includes compensation of outside contracts, of students giving feedback about the curriculum. We've sort of outlined all of that, and they've taken sort of a small portion of that and decided to fund that, right? And very late, right? They haven't actually, haven't hired anyone yet. So I think part of it is that, we also haven't even thought about, we need to start thinking about sort of like beyond this year, because the pilot actually hasn't even started, full pilot hasn't really started, right? Because the district hasn't hired anyone to sustain that. It's been really sort of through our own work, right? And what teachers want to do it right now. And so the question is, in the 5-year plan, if this is year 1, then what is 2, 3, 4, and 5 going to look like? That's more concerning to us, right? And so then we haven't had the space or time, honestly, to really honest with you, to sort of sit down and see okay, because we haven't even gotten year 1 yet under our belt, right? We've said this is what we need for year 1, and we're still fighting for that in the middle of year 1.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Any other questions before we wrap up this panel for public testimony? Katie, I know we're over your time. I appreciate you being here with us late. Shanae and Johnny, thank you too for being with us, and we'll head over to public testimony. I'll get to my list. I'm going to start with Janelle, and then I'm going to go to Jake. I'll let you in the room. Janelle, welcome, and Jake, welcome. And Shanae, Katie, and Johnny, you're welcome to stay on screen or exit stage left or right, whichever one it is for you. Janelle, welcome.
Hi, yes, good evening.
Hi.
Thank you for having me. Should I begin?
Yep, when you're ready, please go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, counselors, and thank you for having me. My name is Janelle Faulkner, and I'm an educator at Young Achievers Science and Math Pilot School. I'm here as part of the Boston Public Schools teacher community and also a member of Educators for Excellence. I would like to advocate for the creation of an inclusive and effective curriculum in our schools, as well as a clear selection process for that curriculum, or those curriculum. Boston Public Schools has made strides in reviewing the current curricula available and have been taking into account the teacher and community voice in doing so. But I would like to see us take this a step further and create a more streamlined approach to how curriculum is being evaluated and chosen, with an outline of the processes that are taking place to do so. It seems like every other year, curricula are being thrown out and replaced. This leaves teachers at a great disadvantage, as we have to start anew with breaking it down into a usable form for our respective communities. We need to address why we're doing this. I'm a middle school science teacher, and as many of us here can guess, the question I get asked the most often is why we're learning a particular thing or the other. My students are at the age where they're beginning to question things they had previously taken for granted and are stepping into their own as young people. However, far too often, the curriculum that is being presented to them really doesn't have any immediate relevance and does not build on their strengths and backgrounds as people. This leads to disengaged students who may then choose to disrupt the learning process as the only way they feel their voices can be heard. Why aren't we doing all that we can to remove this impetus by meeting their needs in the first place? We need a better curriculum so that students can have a better starting point for digging into difficult topics because they'll have an intrinsic reason to do so. The research is clear. When students see themselves reflected and when they perceive themselves as having agency, they excel at higher rates than when they do not feel connected to what they're learning. The National Bureau of Education Research finds that culturally responsive curricula increase student attendance by 21%, GPA by 1.4 grade points, and credits earned by 23%. In choosing curricula that does not reflect the students, we are telling them that we don't think their communities have anything to offer them when it comes to their knowledge and education. Furthermore, when we are unclear about why a curriculum is being selected and keep changing them out year after year, we are setting teachers back. It takes time to be trained on a curriculum. It takes time to internalize it. It takes time to tweak it to match the backgrounds of your students. If we are sinking so much time into any one curriculum, we should be sure that it accurately reflects our goals and needs. This year, teaching remotely has been very challenging. However, during my advisory each morning, I've been able to feature one of my students' families' countries of origins each week, and I discuss the contributions their people have made to the different facets of American life. There was this one little boy who barely spoke to me and rarely ever turned his video on. When I featured the Dominican Republic one week, he spontaneously raised his hand. He declared proudly that the men I was speaking about, he had seen on the Dominican currency and he knew their names. He was proud to have had the background information, and that helped him overcome his fear of speaking out or his lack of interest in class. When I played the Dominican national anthem, another student raised his hand quickly to let me know that even his mother ran into the room to sing along. We were then able to discuss the meaning behind the lyrics and what it said about what the country finds important. This moved into a higher level discourse comparing different anthems and word choices, which also had a trickle-down effect into our science class. The class was buzzing. It set the tone. It allowed students to understand that their backgrounds and their interests were important and that their previous knowledge mattered and was relevant. However, why is the onus on individual teachers to come up with a supplemental curriculum in order to engage students, if we as a district are saying that it is a priority? Do we truly believe that there are sources of strength and knowledge outside of what white people have established? Or are we just paying lip service to Black and Brown communities? Again, I'm asking you to have a clear review process on how curriculum is chosen in the first place so that schools and teachers are able to see the merits and how it will connect to their students. Schools should be able to cater to the needs of their communities without requiring educators to create everything from scratch without district support. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today, and I hope that you enact a policy that is useful, clear, and concise in getting us to our stated goal of teaching all our students. There is strength in our communities, in our diverse backgrounds, and in our prior knowledge. If we do not have curricula that taps into that, we are checking those strengths at the door. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Thank you very much. And thank you for your service to our kids. Jake, welcome. And then we'll go to Lisa.
Thank you, Councilor Asabi George, and everyone for hanging out for so long and holding this hearing on such an important topic. And also thank you to the Ethnic Studies Now teachers for the hard work y'all have done with seemingly no resources. Just so impressed with the work you've done. So I'll keep this short. My name is Jake Resiteritz, and I am the Managing Director of External Affairs for Educators for Excellence Boston. We are focused, I'm a former educator, and we're focused on ensuring that educator voices are heard in policymaking conversations. And so just to quickly say, and my colleague Lisa will actually share more about what our educators have been up to, but just want to say that as docket number 1076 says, it's crucial that we begin providing students in BPS with curriculum that creates meaningful opportunities to critically, academically, and personally examine the histories of people of color, the forms of power that shape our world and worldviews, and the societal shifts necessary to dismantle racism. And so if BPS were able to formally review curriculum to see if it perpetuates this, if it meets this lofty goal, and could start recommending it and building this inherently into curriculum throughout the district, I think that would be one of the best things we could do for our students, and especially thinking beyond just history and social studies and ELA. Frameworks like the Underrepresentation Project allow students to examine scientific fields and take action for equity, inclusion, and justice in science. And the Radical Math Framework does similar things for mathematics. And just, you know, there are a lot of options out there and a lot of ways we can incorporate the community into this conversation about having a better, more anti-racist learning experience overall. I think it's possible, and I think if we devote the resources to finding the right frameworks in Boston, we can do that. And then just widening the scope a little bit. If we do have any, you know, members of the Boston delegation to the Massachusetts State House who are listening, urge you to file legislation to amend Chapter 69, Section 1E of the Mass General Laws to require that statewide standards are anti-racist and include the perspectives of communities of color, and dismantling racism as key priorities. So I will, you know, yield the rest of my time, but thank you so much for, again, having this and allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Jake. Lisa, and then Colette. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Good evening, Boston City Councilors. My name is Lisa Lazar, and I'm the Deputy Director at Educators for Excellence Boston. As Jake named, we're an education nonprofit that works to ensure educators' voices are included in policy-making decisions. On that end, I'm a former science teacher and community organizer, and I'm thrilled that you have created this space to discuss curriculum here in BPS. Simply put, we need to do more to ensure that every student in BPS has access to a high quality and anti-racist curriculum. This isn't just the view of Educators for Excellence or the teachers we represent. A review of the district conducted by DESE that was released this spring found that the way BPS approached curriculum was inconsistent and created inequitable access to high quality education, as Dr. Zayas noted and has already begun to address. Student learning expectations vary from school to school, are not coordinated from grade to grade, and the district is unable to identify which curricula are being used in each of the district schools. And there is no official process for curriculum vetting and selection, or even agreement about what constitutes as curriculum. In addition to concerns around consistent quality, curriculum in BPS often doesn't fully reflect the full diversity of its student population. One example is the Wit and Wisdom ELA curriculum, which local education advocate Edith Bazile conducted an audit on. The curriculum was found to have 78% of its text written by white authors, which is a shocking lack of diversity for a curriculum in 2020. E4E supports ethnic studies courses and echoes Counselor Janie Bach and others who said recently that curriculum that reflects the perspectives and histories of students of color needs to be an inherent part of our curriculum. E4E educators believe that every curriculum framework in BPS should fully incorporate narratives of people from outside of the white dominant mainstream. This should not be limited to just social studies and ELA. Math, science, health, all subjects should be supported by an anti-racist curriculum. I also want to thank the teachers from Ethnic Studies Now for the incredible work that they've been doing to bring ethnic studies to BPS. But as Counselor Janie named, it's just the beginning. Our educators launched the A Better Curriculum campaign, ABC, this fall in hopes of pushing BPS to fix these quality and cultural responsive inequities. They asked that the district develop an official process for vetting and recommending curriculum options and call on the Office of Academic and Professional Learning to establish set criteria around quality and cultural responsiveness to determine which frameworks are the best fit for the district. This process should also include regular opportunities for parents, students, educators, and the broader community advocates to give feedback on potential curricula in order to ensure that decisions are not made in silo. The educators leading the ABC campaign cherish their campus autonomy and are not calling for any sort of oppressive approach, but believe that by having a 1 to 2 district approved options for each grade level, schools that want quality options will have something to choose from. This will also help create greater access to good anti-racist curricula across the district and reduce the inequity that exists in the status quo. In your position as city councilors, I urge you to speak with your counterparts on the school committee about taking action to ensure the district is promoting curriculum options that are high quality and anti-racist. And for some of our educators suggested curriculum vetting criteria, I would like to invite everyone to visit e4e.org/ABC and read our educator authored policy memo there. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And last but not least, Colette Phillips. Colette? There you are.
Thank you very much, Councillor Asabi George and your committee. Nice to see Madam President Kim Janey and Councillor Mejia.
And
I am here to give, can you hear me?
Yes, Councillor Bach is also with us.
Oh, Councillor Bach, yes, so sorry. You look like a student sitting there. So I am here to give testimony. I present this testimony to offer my strong, very strong support for ethnic studies education. There is a need to educate all students about the history of our nation and the contributions of all Americans, especially those who have been victimized by racial, ethnic, and religious injustice. When we consider the introduction of an ethnic studies program, however, it is important to be mindful that many kinds of programs have been established around the country, and they are not the same. I urge that the Boston City Council take the time to understand the variety of ethnic studies programs before it takes measures to integrate a single model. In this regard, I would say the state of California provides a cautionary tale. A model curriculum was offered and championed by supporters of the California Ethnic Studies Now Committee. It sparked a statewide controversy that prompted more than 70,000 letters of complaint this year and the veto of two separate letters by California Governor Gavin Newsom, who expressed concern that they were not sufficiently balanced or inclusive. The California controversy is now into its second year, and education and political leaders are struggling to undo the harm caused by this model curriculum. Kindergarten through 12th grade students should be able to learn about the role of ethnicity, race, and religion in their life of all the city's citizens, including those previously ignored. I am Caribbean. I know that, and I can really relate to what Janelle said about the Dominican Republic young lad. So I would say high quality ethnic studies courses can help this happen, while also addressing essential issues concerning racial injustice. This means that it is about great importance that the Boston Public Schools move forward with full confidence that the ethnic studies program it adopts will be inclusive and balanced. Only limited information has been shared about the Boston Ethnic Studies curriculum. What has been made available suggests that there may be significant parallels between the contemplated Boston model and the controversial California model. I therefore write to urge the following: transparency. The Boston Public School has already committed to piloting a model without, to my knowledge, making it available to the public. It will serve everyone's interest to allow for public review of more detailed information before the program is implemented rather than after. Knowledge. There are many excellent models for ethnic studies education. If it has not yet done so, the Boston Public Schools should undertake a comprehensive survey of existing programs and provide an informed assessment of which model will be best suited to the Boston Public Schools. If it has already made this study, it should be shared publicly together with an indication of which model is preferred and why. This assessment should be shared and made available for public comment. Here, the introduction of a comprehensive ethnic studies program must be an important Boston Public Schools priority. How such a program is developed, implemented, may impact on its capacity to succeed. I urge the Boston Public Schools undertake measures that will ensure a full and well-considered plan that reflects the significance of this step. I want to thank you for this opportunity to share these observations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colette, and thank you everyone for joining us for public testimony. I am going to offer my co-sponsor and Council President Janey any closing remarks.
Yes, thank you so much. And it was great to hear from all those who just testified. Thank you for your very thoughtful presentations and comments. I certainly want to thank the previous panel and other members of the Ethnic Studies Now Committee and the first panel. I think this was a very thoughtful conversation, a very powerful, important conversation that we need to continue and to move forward. But again, I want to view this as an important step, a beginning. We've got to do more than just offer elective courses to some students. We've got to do better. And I am deeply grateful, again, to the committee for their amazing work over a 2-year period on a shoestring budget with no shoe to get us to this far. And so it's incumbent upon us to continue to work with educators, to work with nonprofit leaders, to work with our students, to work with parents and caretakers, with administrators, with everyone, with some urgency of moving this forward in a way that ensures all of our young people and all of our educators benefit from this. And so I'm excited and I'm encouraged, knowing that this is a beginning and a first step, that there is so much interest, and I hope that folks will stay engaged so that we can get to a place where I think we all want to be. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again to all of my colleagues, to everyone who spoke and has submitted a testimony. I look forward to continuing this work with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Janey. Councilor Bach?
I just want to add my thanks to Council President Janey and yourself, Madam Chair, for raising this conversation today, to all the Ethnic Studies Now educators, and also to the Educators for Excellence who joined us for public comment. I really think that our conversations about pedagogy and school systems are so much richer and better targeted when we've got teachers in the room, even if it's the Zoom room. So thank you to you all, and thank you also to Colette for coming and joining us and staying through the whole hearing. And I think I just want to echo the Council President in saying, I think simultaneously that ethnic studies is so important, and also that, and I think maybe it helps to just clarify and separate, like we also need like history curricular reform, right? And like that is another piece of this. And that's a sort of central conversation that we need to be having with the district. So I look forward to continuing that. And thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Brock. Councilor Mejia.
Yes, I've learned so much all day today. I have to say that participating in the council hearing that Councilor Bach hosted earlier today around historical preservation, I walked in the centennial situation. I walked in not really knowing what I was walking into, and I walked out still really thinking about how much work the city of Boston needs to do when we're talking about race. And I kept asking the question about whose history are we going to be celebrating and who are we talking to inform us and what that's going to look like. And so it's really interesting that I'm ending my day the way that I kind of started, which is really with the same question in terms of who is at the table and who is informing what it needs to look like. And so I'm really encouraged to see the educators in particular who stepped up to design something for the district. And it was a shame that they did not get compensated for that. But nonetheless, they did it with their hearts, because their hearts are always in the right place and they know who they work for. So really encouraged by those actions. And I think in the true sense of what Colette Phillips said, and it was so great to see her in the Zoom here with us tonight, that we definitely need to be really super mindful about what accountability and a community engagement process looks like. So in addition to creating an opportunity for people to speak, I think we need to look at what has been designed, test it out, and then bring it back for reflection and revisions. Like, we can't just say we did it and it's done. This needs to be something that is ongoing. And we also need to create the system and the process for feedback in a way that it's going to include the students and the parents and the teachers all in that process, because it can't just be the educators. We just need to make sure that everyone who's invested in this conversation is able to contribute to what the reflections and what the revisions of the next iteration would look like. I think that is really key in terms of this process. And so I'll say that having grown up in Boston and navigating every single school, I never saw myself reflected in anything that was taught or learned. And oftentimes working in the education space with parents, curriculum development and issues of who they see being highlighted during Thanksgiving and Christopher Columbus, the parents always said, why are we learning about someone who stole land? And why aren't we speaking the truth? So if this is our moment to right the wrong, now is the time for us to move forward. And I'm so incredibly grateful to President Council Janey. And I'm going to say it once, right? Council President Janey. I'm an English language learner. I always mix things up, but she's the Madam President of the Council. I'm just so incredibly grateful that you brought this hearing to the space, and really grateful for your leadership and your relentless convictions when it comes to racial equity. So thank you for creating space for us to have this conversation. And thank you to Councilor Sabi George for hosting this hearing, and for all those that participated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And I think on that note, I will share the reasons why I called for both the ethnic studies hearing as well as the curriculum hearing. I called for both of them at the same time, was because they are, I think, undeniably belonging together. Because when we talk about ethnic studies, it needs to be part of the curriculum. And we also need to look at our curriculum as a whole. That work is so terribly important when we think about our students across the district and their ability to access academics and find their personal achievement, and that we make sure that there is an equitable rollout of access to that curriculum. And I think of that in that first panel, we talked a lot about common and consistent curriculum across all schools, so that students have the access to high quality education across all schools. And a part of that curriculum is why ethnic studies was a part of today's conversation as well, because it is an important component of what we do as a district, and why I've called for those hearings. Again, as a former teacher, as a BPS parent, curriculum is so important, and we need to make sure that we're continuing to review the curriculum that's offered across the district as it exists in all of our schools, and work to improve it. And one way to improve it is to make sure that we are including ethnic studies as part of it. So excited that we got through this over 3-hour hearing. I think really important stuff. It was a very dense hearing, lots and lots of information, and lots of great questions from colleagues. So I'm grateful for your support and your work in this hearing this evening, and look forward to the next steps ahead. So thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. This hearing is adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Adios.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.